Hello. Hello. Sir,
Hello. Hi, sir. Can you hear me, sir? इन इनका देना पीए में देना एक सर इनका खाली सर कैन यू जस्ट स्पीक सर
Yeah. Can you hear me here?
यस थैंक यू सर थैंक यू
Okay.
थैंक यू
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on this lovely occasion. We're all set to begin this evening's proceedings in 5 minutes from now. So those of you who are outside, those of you who are inside, chatting up with your colleagues, friends, we request all of you to kindly settle down so that we can begin as scheduled. Thank you so much. And a quick reminder to just place your electronic devices, cell phones, etc., to the silent mode so that we can proceed unscathed and without any interruptions. Thank you very much once again for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. We're scheduled to begin in 5 minutes.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can see that some of you have settled down and taken your seats. So those of you who are just standing and chatting with your colleagues and friends, I request you to kindly take your seats so that we can begin our proceedings this evening. We're all set. We've got our speakers who are here as well. Thank you so much for being here on this lovely occasion. We can start as soon as all of you are settled in. Once again, a quick reminder to place your cell phones and other electronic devices to the silent mode. We have an exciting evening lined up for us, ladies and gentlemen. Just waiting for a few of you to settle down so that we can begin accordingly. And for those of you who are already seated, thank you so much. And we shall begin as soon as the rest of them are settled. All right, we're about to begin. So very quickly requesting the last of you to kindly settle down, please. And once again, and my last reminder this evening to place your cell phones and other electronic devices to the silent mode. Thank you so much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, we're all set to begin. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Namaskar to each and every one of you present here. On behalf of the Vivriti Group, we'd like to welcome all of you to the first edition of the GameChangers Summit 2022. My name is Bhavna Balakrishnan. It is a pleasure and an honor to be your host this evening. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Vivriti Group needs absolutely no introduction, and it's certainly not a name you haven't heard before. Vivriti was born 5 years ago with the aim to change the landscape of mid-market lending by enabling debt to hundreds of mid-market enterprises across the country. A young, dynamic and spirited institution, Vivriti is constantly working towards its vision of creating the largest and most valuable platform for enterprise finance. The word Vivriti, ladies and gentlemen, means progress and development and speaks volumes about our passion to continuously strive for results that add value to our very own ecosystem. Vivriti Group viewed the Indian mid-market enterprises as critically underserved and no access to capital. That's approximately about 20,000 enterprises employing over 3 million people. Think about that for a second. Despite a challenging macro environment, the Vivriti Group has built a successful franchise, navigating through very difficult times, including the demonetization, GST rollouts, and large corporate defaults, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic included. Over the years, ladies and gentlemen, the group has witnessed 100% year-on-year growth while maintaining rock-steady asset quality, and their 400 lenders and investors have backed them in achieving this. Let's take a moment and please give them a big, big round of applause, because without your support and without your passion in us, this would not have been possible. So thank you very, very much for being our pillars of support. Ladies and gentlemen, this gathering is not just a celebration of the last 5 years, but rather celebrating the game changers who have paved the way and have changed the game in their own inspiring way. As a run-up to the event, Vivriti Group launched its Learning Summit, a podcast series in partnership with CNBC TV 18 and moneycontrol.com, where disruptors across industries came together to share stories of innovation, their journey, and new learnings. The Learning Summit had 4 podcasts, each focusing on agriculture, healthcare, renewable energy, and technology, where brands like Origo Commodities, Punjab Renewable Energy Systems, Fourth Partner Energy, Flexi Loans, Genworks Health, Involution Healthcare, Stellabs Technologies, and Goat Brand Labs shared their stories of hustle, struggle, and putting India on the global map. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have them amidst us, and we would like to sincerely thank each and every one of you for the legacy that you have built on your own terms. Another strong round of applause, if you will, for these brands, these people who have truly done it in such a fantastic manner in their own way. Ladies and gentlemen, it is finally time to kickstart the first edition of the Game Changers Summit 2022. We'd like to take the opportunity to thank our media partner, CNBC TV 18. To begin with, I'd like to call on stage Mr. Narayan Ramachandran, Independent Chairperson of Vivriti Asset Management, to share a few words and welcome the audience. A little bit about you, sir, before we call you on stage. Mr. Narayan is the Chairman and CEO of Cluden Acquisition Corporation, a special purpose acquisition company listed on NASDAQ. He is also the co-chairman of Unitas Capital, India's largest social enterprise bank, and chairman of Caspian Debt and UC Inclusive Credit, both pioneering firms working to bring credit to underserved markets. Apart from this, he also serves as the chairman and co-founder of Include Labs, a social business enterprise working in the field of education and public health. Ladies and gentlemen, here is a man who has certainly donned several hats. We are truly honored to have you here with us. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as we welcome Mr. Narayan Ramachandran onto the stage.
Good gosh, I must be the only guy whose Aadhaar photograph is better than that. So my welcome to everyone. Hello. On behalf of the board members, Namrata Kaul, Anita Belani, and CEO Vineet Sukumar, and the entire team at Vivriti, let me add my 2 cents of welcome to all of you to leave your families on a Friday evening and show up here to listen to fixed income. So thank you. The last 30 years have seen a revolution in Indian equity markets. All of you know that. So 30 years ago, when the first major steps of reform took place in India and the plumbing was put in for the listed equity market, listed equity took off. And then with the serendipitous Y2K and the arrival of both global capital and lots of entrepreneurship, the equity markets took off. The private equity markets took off in a big way, so much so that today India is counted among the top 2, 3, 4 private equity markets in the world for both its entrepreneurship and its potential for return. So you heard it here first. I think the beginning of something very similar in fixed income is taking place as we speak. In sovereign credit, as you know, we have made significant progress over the last decade or so, so much so that at this moment in sovereign credit, we're talking about inclusion in global emerging market debt indices, and potentially that will happen over the next 2 or 3 years. So sovereign credit has sort of arrived. Corporate debt, broadly speaking, has flattered to deceive over the last 20 years. Every moment it looks like it's around the corner, but it has not so far happened. Luckily for us, over the last 7 or 8 years, the settlement systems, the basic plumbing of corporate debt has improved on the listed and trading side, and lots of activity and interest on the private market side has started. And this is where Vivriti comes in. I think Vivriti plays a major role as a specialized player in facilitating the intermediation of corporate debt in India. And I'm very proud to be associated with the firm as independent chairman of the asset management enterprise. Let me tell you a little bit about Vivriti. It is the only specialized player in sort of mid-market performing credits at the moment, we believe. And this is its sort of main and sole focus of its activity. It seeks to bring together the supply and demand side of corporate debt, both listed and private, and in so doing, match supply and demand of credit. So this is what our mission is, this is what we are after, and this is what I believe that we are in significant movement towards accomplishing. Vivriti today is about 6,000 crores assets under management in a short 5-year span. And technology sort of suffuses everything we do from boardroom to backroom, if you will. So you will see that whatever we do it with sort of a platform notion to it. And this allows us not only to sort of dot the I's and cross the T's, but scale quite effectively, which is how we've got to the spot. And many of you in the room, I recognize this is how we've got to the spot of being sort of matching supply and demand on credit. So in very simple terms, we are sort of the specialist fixed income alternative manager, broadly speaking, on one side as the NBFC, where we lend our own capital, and on the other side as the asset management firm, where we work as a specialist in intermediating this capital. Vivriti is also about enabling entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship in India. Now, you might ask, what is the role of a fixed income firm with entrepreneurs? But corporate debt is a complex animal. It has all the difficulties of equity, which is judging human talent, and all the difficulty of fixed income, which is judging interest rate risk and all the other risks that only fixed income people understand. So it's the confluence of both of those. So for us, we believe that one of the major functions of a corporate debt specialist is indeed to, one, understand and comprehend the human talent behind the enterprise, but two, to make a judgment on it, and in so doing, choose that which will make all of our investors the expected return that they seek. The old adage in India used to be that the enterprising have no scruples and the scrupulous have no enterprise. But that's changing. I think Peter Drucker said it best when he said that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so, just like in the equity field, we're now beginning to see a lot of models with entrepreneurs who need fixed income capital. I think the early phases, people were fascinated with this term asset light, but it's now becoming a little popular to also do asset moderately heavy, if not fully heavy. And the asset moderately heavy people need capital for both working capital as well as for balance sheet activity. And that's where the fixed income part that we do comes in. So the raison d'etre of Vivriti, we live for every day, is celebration of entrepreneurship. And you will see that this event is merely a continuity of exactly that idea. We hope by the end of the day today, and it'll take you a couple of hours, but you will see and be inspired by all the game changers in the multiple fields that you will see them in the hours to follow. We hope you will be inspired by them and will take away, if nothing else, that India is a very vibrant, entrepreneurial, idea-rich place, and it is for all of you to sort of learn and contribute to that vibrancy. A quick summary of the evening. Anurag from One Card, Karthik from Light Rock, and Chetan from Sun Mobility will be in conversation with Nisha Podar of CNBC 18 about the emergence of Indian entrepreneurship. So that's the first one. So that's sort of straight down the middle, if you will. But straying a little bit from the middle, the second one will be Mithali Raj, the former captain of the Indian women's team, in conversation with commentator and extra innings host Gaurav Kapoor. For a complete different change, we will have Sonam Wangchuk, the man of many talents, who will talk about what led him down a path of transformation in science, education, and environment. And last but certainly not least, the irrepressible and very young Mr. K.V. Kamath, who started a public bank right around the corner here called ICICI many decades ago, went on to start the new bank at BRICS, and is yet again charged with starting a new bank for infrastructure and development as we speak. So Mr. Kamath will round out the session this evening. We do hope you have the chance not only to learn and be inspired by all the folks on stage, but also have the opportunity to meet with professional colleagues and perhaps some of those you haven't met over the many months thanks to COVID as the evening progresses. So thank you once again, welcome, and we'll begin the evening.
Thank you for the warm welcome, sir, but I'm going to have to request you to please join us back on stage because we'd like to take this opportunity to request our founder and managing director, of course, Mr. Vineet Sukumar. Could you please do the honors and present a memento to Mr. Narayan Ramachandran? Thank you very much. Could we have a stronger round of applause, please? Could we have a memento that we'd like to present? Thank you for the lovely start to the evening and for brilliantly summarizing what we're about to witness this evening. Thank you, sir. Next up on the agenda, ladies and gentlemen, we have an exciting and enlightening panel discussion on the topic Emergence of Indian Entrepreneurship. Now, this session will be moderated by Ms. Nisha Podar, market editor and anchor, CNBC TV 18, and joining her on stage to share their thoughts are prominent entrepreneurs from various sections of businesses who have made and continue to make the country proud through all their entrepreneurial activities. Ladies and gentlemen, our panelists for this discussion include Mr. Anurag Sinha, founder of OneCard, India's best metal credit card; Mr. Karthik Srivatsa, Managing Partner, India and Chief Strategy Officer of Lightrock India. And joining us virtually will be Mr. Chetan Maini, co-founder and chairman, Sun Mobility. Now, before I request them to please join us on stage, a little bit about each of them. Let's begin with Mr. Chetan. He has over 25 years experience in leading teams that developed electric, hybrid and solar vehicles and has applied for and been granted over 35 global patents. Mr. Chetan played an instrumental role in advising the central and state governments on respective EV policies, having invented the Reva, India's first electric car in the year 1999, an electric vehicle much ahead of its time. He is globally acknowledged as the pioneer in the electric vehicle space. We are truly honored and privileged to have you here, sir, with us. He will join us, of course, virtually. Next up, we also have with us Mr. Anurag, who comes with over 2 decades of experience in digital credit and payment, has deep exposure in payments, consumer lending and banking, structured finance, investment banking, and so much more. Apart from OneCard, he has also co-founded Walnut, a personal finance app. Truly happy to have you here with us for this discussion, sir. And next up, we'd also like to formally introduce Mr. Karthik Srivatsa. Now, here is a name that every entrepreneur knows and remembers. An entrepreneur himself, prior to Lightrock, he was with Lightspeed Venture Partners, a global venture capital firm with over 2 billion under management, where he was a founding partner of the India office. Mr. Karthik was also a management consultant with McKinsey & Company in his early days. Truly happy to have all our panelists here with us. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, can we have Mr. Anurag Sinha, Mr. Karthik Srivatsa, and of course, Mr. Chetan Maini will be joining us virtually. A nice warm round of applause as we welcome our panelists. And can we have Ms. Nisha Podar take over the proceedings as the moderator and take us through an enlightening few minutes of conversation. Thank you. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, and a very warm welcome to all of you in this riveting discussion on emergence of Indian entrepreneurship. And before I take it to my esteemed panelists, I would like to congratulate the entrepreneurs who are in this room and the ones who are watching virtually, that it's the sheer great determination, agility, as well as a lot of fresh ideas that sailed us through during the worst and the most challenging times that we have seen in the recent past. So the digital economy really survived, and our own economy as well as our lives were mobile because of the entrepreneurs and the startup ecosystem. Now let me first question Karthik about the emergence and the evolution of the promoters into founders, and how have you seen that journey in your own particular experience as an entrepreneur and as an investor?
First of all, thanks for having me, and it's a privilege to be part of the Vivriti family as well as join this. We've been part of either building or supporting entrepreneurs for the last 15 years now, and I think the word promoter or proprietor was the initial view of people with some sort of long-term capital that they had built businesses, and in some ways the evolution to the word founder is more recent, which in some ways has come because of the rise, as Narayan said, of private equity backing first-time entrepreneurs without legacy backgrounds. And what has become at least clear, and this is probably cliched, is around that we are a country of entrepreneurs and everyone wants to start a business. The truth is that we've been entrepreneurs to a large extent out of by default because we've not had enough jobs and everyone is a single family entrepreneur. That said, amongst people who have rich background in building or operating companies in large businesses, we've seen a significant shift in terms of how they view entrepreneurship as a credible option, a thing that's acceptable from a values and from a family perspective. And as we've seen successes of first generation entrepreneurs potentially make it over the last 10 years, I would say that's in some ways the big surge that's happened. We have seen that, and I don't want to make the semantic difference between founder and promoter, but for people to genuinely feel about problems that they face and feel that they have the power to address them, that confidence that they can go out and raise money, that's like truly remarkable. That's what we've seen. And in some ways, this has been a result of the emergence of private equity or the funding market and the angel ecosystem, etc., over the last 10 years. But equally, we've seen just the growth of the market and us trying to become a middle-income country, us not trying to at least solve for the basic necessities and think about what the future can be.
That's right.
That's where we see the large change in the market.
Right. So I especially started by posing this question because after the entire debt disaster that our country had gone into, promoter perception was the one thing that was questioned, and therefore the emergence from promoter to founder, which the digital economy brought in much better. So that's why I wanted to strike that difference. Anurag, tell us about your journey as an entrepreneur, and how do you see the new age entrepreneurs at this point?
Yeah, so thank you for having me here. So the way currently entrepreneurship is being done, the way I define it's probably the third stage of evolution in the current entrepreneurship era, which we've seen starting from 2006-07 when the first startup companies got formed. Most of those entrepreneurs took very, very big calls because they were, more than capital was not there. More importantly, most of the talent was not going into that area. So they were the first one to dream big and, started building the first stage of, ideas and, solving for problems. Post, we saw the next stage came in 2014-15, which is the Geo Era, when mobile became the distribution point. And, India is a very large country, and distribution has always been a big problem to solve for good products to reach to masses.
Yes.
And especially if you are looking for a venture-backed company, growth and scale is inbuilt into that.
Yes.
And so this was extremely important. And what we saw, some of the older companies maturing, but more importantly, the newer entrepreneurs coming straightway building for mobile as the distribution medium.
Yes.
And now what we see, the third stage where, of course, some of the earlier companies are mature, but what we are also seeing now, much more serious talent is getting into entrepreneurship, and they're looking at bigger problems to begin with itself.
Yes.
And a lot of people have spent decades of corporate experience are coming, in across sectors. Financial services, of course, we have seen the most because it's a regulated area. As people are, looking for bigger problems, they understand the network you build in financial services, the understanding of regulation, understanding of risk. These becomes
Yes.
good ingredients to build. But that's how we've seen, evolution of, or at least the way I saw in last, 10, 12 years.
All right, so fire in the belly is one thing that is the biggest takeaway that I get from yours, but of course we cannot really forget the flush of funds that we got, especially from overseas, which backed so many entrepreneurs in India, and so many good ideas could really be lifted, catapulted into bigger businesses, and therefore so many unicorns got created. Let me take it to Chetan. Chetan, with the Reva magic that you created, how much is getting an idea much ahead of its time important for a founder?
Well, I think that it's good teams, it's good business idea, and the capital, and of course the timing. And today, well, 20 years ago, I believe it was a little too early when we started electric mobility. But today the timing is right? The way we think of what governments are doing, kind of capital that's available, the technology readiness, where oil prices are. So it's a game changer. So my only thing for that is, yes, I was very early in the first stint, but that gave me a tremendous amount of learnings about what to do, not just in India, but globally. And so in many ways is helping me as the second stint as an entrepreneur to take those 20 years of learning when the timing is really right and leverage that in a much bigger way as we can look at it. So it's sometimes, yes, you're early sometimes when you start off, but today I think the timing is right.
I would say you were too ahead of your time at that time. All right, but tell me about one mantra you have as as an entrepreneur, which keeps you going for so many years.
I see challenges as opportunities, and I found that if there's a technical challenge, overcoming it, we've created patents. There's been a business challenge, we've created a new model to do it. When governments removed subsidies from our business 20 years ago, we went global because of it. So in many ways, each of those challenges, looking at it from a point of view and opportunity, has probably been an important way of how we've thought of the business and thought of a mantra, I would say.
All right, so very well said. Opportunity in every adversity, and we've seen that, Karthik. How much do you bet on the founder while investing in a company? Of course, business idea is very important, but how much on the dynamism of the founder?
You know what? The easy answer for this is it's everything, right? The more nuanced answer to this is it's very significant. At the same time, the way we've looked at it specifically is that it's important to solve important problems. And I think what we are seeing that potentially needs a reboot in how we think about the role of capital, both in terms of long-term vision around staying there and solving the problem. Because 20 years from now, we will look at these problems and we will say these are like no-brainers, right? We should have put a lot more capital. We'll be a 10 trillion economy, and then these companies will be like 20, 30 billion, right? The nature of potentially, the short answer to your question is, we are in a very uncertain environment, and therefore we want to make sure that the entrepreneurs have both the fortitude and the endurance to go through volatility, as well as the intellect and ability to problem solve through these difficult situations. They have the ability to charm through and inspire people to join them, as well as inspire investors to back the journey that they are taking. That said, we also feel that the environment in terms of how we can unlock the promise of, in some ways, the generation, is for us to also rethink how capital flows into this market. How do we think through fund cycles? How do we think through creating that long-term, stable capital base for in some ways, entrepreneurs to succeed equally?
Yeah.
Right? And we'll come back to this in the next question, is we want to talk about, we are here, and as Narayan initially insinuated, the the role of debt in this market, right? We're all talking about equity and entrepreneurship. But I think like we should talk about debt, and we'll come to that because I think that there is a strong role of how all of the venture capital innovation is worked through that.
I think as the startup has evolved, this entire space has gone more mature. I think capital allocation, capital structures, these are very critical learnings from the past as well. And now there is more agility. But talking about agility, first I want to understand what the entrepreneurs are really made of. So Anurag, how important is agility in your sector in particular? While the regulations are changing every day, if not every minute, how do you really tackle that and restructure your business strategy according to the changing dynamics?
Yeah, so I think anybody who's operating in financial services sector has to, accept the fact that regulations are there, and we usually don't navigate, you follow. That's the simple mantra. But I think what Karthik said, having long-term vision helps a lot. So while agility is important, but I think as long as founders, and I would also say not only founders, but the core team around founders, as long as they're aligned to the same goal, then I think we traverse. And that's how we have seen, at least in our company, as well as all the other founders we learn from.
Yes.
Having a long-term vision really guides the team towards it. A tactical measure, what we do is that as founders, as well as core team, have to always do zoom out, zoom in. I'm like, this is a mantra we keep repeating in our company to everyone, that every time you zoom in, because you want to make sure that execution is happening, because at the end of the day, everything is all about execution. But at the same time, you zoom out and say, fine, are we moving in the right direction?
Yes.
Just want to also add third point is that, I think it's true for every sector, but probably a little bit of humility helps. And that, we follow. I always tell all my...
I will catch you on that. Do you think humility is lacking right now?
No, not. I'm just saying that as you scale up, many times it just creeps into your thought process across the team. See, especially when you're a small 20-member, 30-member team, everything is supercharged. Everybody's in the same table. As you grow big, you grow 200 people, 300 people, and more about your own internal perception, the external perception starts, building around you. It's extremely important for us to stay on course. And, just to add to the first 2 points I made, being humble just helps.
Right. To that point, Karthik, how open are most of the founders to taking suggestions and directions from the investors? How do you see that particular bit?
I think one is investors. Like I would just say that just taking input, right? Because you'll be able to, investors are not a repository of all the knowledge, right? We are very, very focused on understanding that entrepreneurs are smart enough to know that they can learn, right? Because I think it's the true test of a great founder to be able to learn. And therefore, it's in some ways a litmus test to understand that at points it's very lonely, and if you're not able to like lean on others, inspire other people to, and be able to get smarter and more to complement your vision,
yes,
you're going to build some business, but it's not going to be lasting or enduring. So I would say that the statistical answer to that is yes, there's the whole range of entrepreneurs who will take advice and who will, but anyone who has really succeeded, even though they may be delusional, right? They have means to be able to tap other people's knowledge and advice and use it in a way that helps overall.
And intelligent people learn from other people's mistakes. So that's also there. But I asked you specifically because a lot of them have made their way to public market and are also have that dream of making it to the bosses. And the stakeholder management in a very large crowd of investors is something that some of them have struggled with. So that's one aspect. Chetan, you want to come in on this and also talk about the ability to bounce back, because your past experiences have been great ideas, but too ahead of time. So how do you bounce back from a situation like that?
Well, the first part, which was related to investors and how we see that, I think what was helped me at a very early stage is while we had a lot of family investment, we actually had a professional board, and that gave you a sense of culture right from day one, of having a sounding body around you who could really give you a good advice and fairly independent. And so when you got investors, you were very used to that kind of a culture, and that really helped. In fact, when times were tough, some of them would fly across and come and spend a day or two with you all the way, and that I think was really good. So my experience in general, both at Reva and later at Sun, and today at Sun Mobility, has been fabulous, and we've been very fortunate that they're really partners in progress, and we're seeing, as you align with investors and they see your vision, and you are transparent and you communicate in times of difficulty even more, there's a sense of openness to solve problems together. In terms of bouncing back, you have problems every day. I think it's about starting a fresh day with that same energy. You've got a team behind you, which you have to show. And for me, it's been the bigger vision of creating a sustainable and green world. And the company is a smaller portion of creating a bigger vision. And I think that vision of mine has helped me through difficult times to bounce back when things have been challenging.
All right, and would you like to share any of your experiences on the biggest challenges faced in real life, and also how you surmounted it?
There has been so many, but I think the one that comes to mind was, we were ready to launch Reva in 2001, and a month before the subsidies got pulled away and taxes for electric vehicles doubled and internal combustion engines went down, and we put everything in it and we're ready to launch, and that was part of our business plan. It was you had to you had a lot of employees depending upon you, and you had an idea that you worked for 5 years on. But I think what turned us around was that's the time we looked at global markets. I don't think as a company that had produced cars for 2-3 years, we looked at global markets, and over time 50% of our sales were global. The fact that we could change that, as I mentioned earlier, adversity to something that was really meaningful was today very, very meaningful for us. But those 2 years to get there was probably a very challenging time, because for us to move to a global space when that ecosystem wasn't available in India, be it to test or get the capabilities, this is early 2000. Today it's a mature market. Was both technically and financially very challenging, but highly rewarding when we were able to put our first cars out on the UK roads.
Right, so thanks for sharing that, and of course, all of us are learning from those experiences. Anurag, you have anything to share in your journey in creating the company and taking the first steps towards it? How difficult was it?
So my most challenging time was the COVID times. We started in February 19 as a company, and our product was in beta in Feb 20. We were about to go live. We had run a wait list. People were waiting for our product, and then COVID one happened. And it was a very different type of crisis, because in financial world, we've seen, like financial crisis where you go through it, moderate your strategies. But this was a health crisis. We didn't know how long will this last. People were not allowed to go out. Consumption, of course, was halted. We didn't know how many people will lose jobs. Now, being in consumption credit area, both income and consumption both were halted. This is like double whammy. And all the data sources which typically a digital credit relies on, we had almost no access to the data for almost 3-4 months, because the regulator has told bureaus should not update any bad, data in the bureau. So, and on top of it, you're also worried about your employees. Being a small company, we were a 45-member team. And also in our area, security is a big, issue. Being in, our platform is all about transaction credit. How do you handle security of transactions in a remote function?
Yes.
So everything had to be detailed. So I think for me, that was, and not only for me, for the entire team, and I think that bounded the team even stronger. I'm so happy to say now, with a couple of years behind that, the entire 50-member team, almost 45, 50, are still with us, everybody, because, that period we lived, lived through together, kind of gave a much bigger sense of belonging to each other. So that was my toughest period. COVID too affected us, but since it was short period, probably we were mentally prepared, but COVID-1 was big learning for us.
Right. So big learning there, and there are so many stories. Karthik, you have any stories to share on how to surmount some of those big challenges in recent times?
I think from if you talk about the big challenges, I don't necessarily see that there is a silver bullet in all of this. I think like methodical problem solving and knowing that there is light at the end of the tunnel, having the confidence of thinking through that every phase has come and gone.
Yes.
Right? I think that's where culture, the ability for the team to stick together, to have a larger purpose around which they are rallying, all of that is where you find these recesses of strength and energy for you to go through in these situations.
All right, so I'll share one example. In my last visit to New York, I met one of the food delivery, executives, and he said when COVID hit, they had call center guys operating out of South Asia, and they couldn't work from home because they did not have computers or maybe even phone connections. And so the entire team in New York got on calls and took orders because people needed food. So these are the ways in which a lot of companies had surmounted a lot of challenges during the pandemic. But Karthik, one important question. We have seen the entire evolution of entrepreneurs in India in the recent times, and there are many learnings on that. Now, basis of the growth has been the foreign money and also equity dilution. Now, how relevant or how important is it for the founders in the new generation now, after we have gone through one whole cycle of learning, to really look at that capital structure model at this point?
Yeah, no, this is a topic that's dear to us, and in some ways, as an entrepreneurial firm ourselves, our overall focus over, if you take a 2-3 decade view, and then we are thinking long term, is around how we create the right capital environment and then how we are part of that system. The role of equity in some ways is to convert uncertainty to risk, in the sense that there is 0 to 1 view whether this will work or not, and eventually risk, for me at least, is when you get to business fit, right? So this business has a revenue, it knows how to make money after its costs, and therefore you've got to a situation where you've proven that this great idea that I started off, which was just on paper, now actually is solving for a problem. There are people willing to pay for it, and you can potentially run a business, which means that you'll make profits and then you can grow on it. I think after that, where we see the gap at this point of time, and risk, there's a lot more risk capital required in this market because there are a lot of problems that are still waiting to be solved. For us, our markets are very oriented towards private enterprise, right? Like 70% of healthcare in India is private. More than 60% of education is private, right? So these are extremely large problems that require both responsible and equitable solutions at the right cost. The role of debt is where, and I think our association as well as Quest in helping Vivriti, UB, and all of the things that have emerged out of the fantastic founders here have been around how debt becomes an integral part of, in some ways, the startup revolution, right? How do people transition through innovation in debt products where you don't need to have 3 years of profits and a large asset base for you to access debt markets? That was essentially the old eligibility criteria for debt. But if you look at the likes of how even personal credit works, where Anurag, etc., championing, right? We think that there needs to be a lot more that happens specifically for startups, where the repricing of some of the risk is going to happen, right? So as of now, you only have the bookends of, even if you take for SME credit, you potentially are increasingly seeing solutions for working capital. 15 years ago, there was nothing, right? If you look at business cash flow underwriting, 15 years ago, there was nothing, right? So we are seeing the need for debt, which is actually 5x or 10x the size of the capital, of the equity capital market.
Yes.
That needs to come, right? And obviously, we are a debt-starved economy. We are like, our credit to GDP is like 0.6.
Yes.
In other markets, you have 3x. But what we think is the big innovation is how the equity markets and, which is the private equity market, and the debt markets work together to create a composite solution where this is not entirely dilutive all the time. It's not about like people owning your business. After a while, it's about you becoming sustainable and finding sources of capital that help you grow.
Right. So we have seen pitfalls of heavily depending on foreign, equity funding as well. And thankfully now, venture debt is also now picking up. Some of the banks may also look at it and focus on the startup. SBI recently opened its branch in Bengaluru, especially for startups. But Anurag, you understand this space with your background. How do you see this emerging? Will there be another whole evolution of understanding debt by the founders who had not tackled debt? Because debt has been the lifeline of all businesses throughout the Indian entrepreneurship journey. And it is a cheaper mode, definitely. And we have seen pitfalls of equity funding also in the fundraisers and the cycles which are now on a downturn now. So given this perspective, how easy or difficult is it to tackle that debt, and how quickly will this pick up?
So I'm going to answer this from an entrepreneur point of view.
Yeah.
So I think, as I mentioned in my first answer, that we are, first of all, we are seeing that a lot of startups maturing, where they have actually cash flows which are more predictable. And, if we have to get access to credit, that is something is extremely important for founders to solve for first, because their first priority is to solve for customer issue. I mean, is there a market for our ideas or not? Second thing is, I think we all understand founder equity is quite precious. I think a lot of us are realizing this more, because now we are able to get to the level where cash flows are more predictable. Some of us have also created assets. A lot of initially startups came which were extremely asset-light businesses, which the traditional lenders did not look at. So I can completely agree that a much more balanced capital structure is the right way to go. And these conversations have started in entrepreneur community a lot. And venture debt is one. What Vivriti is doing is a classic gap. I'm like, because the companies have to cross this to go to be eligible for a large ticket financing from banks, which is much cheaper, much longer. But how do you cross that gap? And it's well timed, because now we have a set of companies which are in this stage. Probably 5 years back, it was a little ahead of time, but this is the right time. And if people can also forget about, one is credit itself. You have to undercover, you have loans, and you also have bonds. I mean, people like Vivriti can package 2-3 startup, let's say, issues to create a much more hedge structure so that it's more palatable. But I would just want to also see that we have seen a lot of Indian HNIs and lots of other people also looking at these debt classes, which was never the case. So all of us, I mean, I think, have, you know, especially in financial services, long-term business, you got to keep raising money, so the dilution is imminent. We got to make sure that how much can you optimize. So no two ways about it. We need to look for a much more balanced cap structure as we scale. You know, in future. A lot of companies, by the way, are already mixing debt now. If you look at $50 million plus rounds, you will see a good mix of equity and debt.
Yes, definitely, and that is really emerging. Chetan, you have any views on this or any particular changes you now find in the startup ecosystem after we have evolved out of the last entire cycle?
Yeah, I think that today, with especially on the technology side, what you're seeing is a fairly level playing field in new spaces. And what earlier people had a lot of advantage in, I think that be it even hardware, software, and product coming together, you're seeing that shift today in a lot of this, in a lot of the newer businesses. Earlier it was only software oriented, but really hard assets and solutions around that are coming through also, which also means that the way of financing and innovative financing is going to be very different. So when you're especially looking at clean tech businesses that are going to come in, when you're thinking of assets that are going to be needed to deploy for a larger period of time, but you can have, you know, better revenue streams coming out of it. Such models which were created around areas of renewable energy need to now look at further areas as we think of mobility and other new businesses. So I do believe that this space is a bit uncharted and it's going to need new models. And what's going to help a lot today is that there's a lot of data available because things are connected. And so the decisions that would have earlier been more difficult, today a lot of debt financing and other investments can happen based on data, predictive information, ML and AI algorithms that can look how things would be. So I think it's going to be a little bit more different way of how you would think of funding today, right? Where earlier you looked at past balance sheets and everything, today it's going to be a new world of data that's going to play a large role in how we can get financing in place.
All right, that's a very innovative idea that data analytics is going to be used in this form. But Chetan, now I want to understand your vision on the electric vehicle segment and that sector in India right now. How far away are we to the final adoption in full force on this?
So globally, it's just growing amazing, right? Last month, 70% of all new cars sold in Norway were electric, right? A year ago, India on electric vehicles to what it is today, on two-wheelers, we've grown 8x. Last 2 months, 51% of all electric all three-wheelers sold in India were electric, right? So this is huge progress, what we're looking at it, and the new reports coming out is talking of between 40 to 70% CAGR between now and 2030, right? So I think we're at a really good point in the country, and you know, I think the two-wheeler and three-wheeler space will be faster, which really constitutes 85% of India, and then you're going to see a lot more on the buses and a bit of the trucking, and you're seeing already the first 10,000 orders from the government coming in with an option to do 50,000 more here. But the two and three wheelers, which is a first and last mile, both for personal and passenger transportation goods, I think is going to be the big game changer. Today, with the new business models like battery swapping, you can get the cost of electric vehicles to be cheaper than internal combustion engine vehicles, and you can get the cost of energy to be cheaper than gasoline. So it's here to stay, and adoption is rising. So I'm really bullish. You know, I think that by 2030, some of these segments would have 50 to 80% of electrification. Cars would be much less, maybe by 30% or so. But this would be a game changer for us. And that's, from an energy point of view itself, by 2030 is a $200 billion opportunity. So this is a huge transformation that we're going to see in the country.
This, Chetan, definitely is a game changer, and your outlook has been quite positive. Karthik, a word on technological risk as an investor. I want to always understand that bit a lot more in detail, because in electric vehicle journey as well, technology has been moving very fast, and also it becomes cheaper with every year. How do you incorporate that bit, and how do the founders pitch to you about defending themselves on this point?
This has been a big evolution over the last 10 years, right? Historically, there was a lot of focus on execution-oriented businesses in the sense that time and trusted technology, but we just want to like implement that because the next substitute is like inferior, and therefore there's a large time for us to. And historically, that's been the bet over the last 10 years. That's in some ways the middle of the bell curve for private equity. We have not had a large innovation funding ecosystem, but that's very rapidly happening, both in terms of you can only spurn innovation if you know that there's enough capital for you to take bets on disruptive technologies, whether it's in biotech, whether it's in nanotech, whether it's in just artificial intelligence, etc. We're seeing a lot of that ecosystem develop, right? And therefore, there are firms that exclusively focus not on the execution part, right? But on just the innovation and the science of how the next product comes. And then, investors have different models. They would assume that 15 experiments will not work and maybe 2 will work. And therefore, the whole model of the venture fund is built around that. In models specifically, like you asked, where you are executing, but there is also a technological risk in the sense that you put a battery in a car and you have installed like, whatever, 100,000 of them, they're going on the street, and you find ways, now you're saying that there's a new battery that potentially the next generation, and I just need to remove them and put them back.
And charger of one generation doesn't work in the third gen battery. So you've already set that up.
I think these are the corner cases where people think about financing, people think about ways to insure, people think about ways of managing technology obsolescence. I think Chetan would be better placed to answer about specifically, if you look at the EV market, how this works. But these are problems that we are increasingly grappling with, right?
Yes.
Because we've seen, at least in a few sectors, we've seen the rate of technology innovation being much faster than the fund cycle.
Right.
And therefore, these are new problems at this point of time, because the innovation between 2005 and 2015, we've seen all of that between 2020 and 22. So the rate of things changing has dramatically increased. So these are new problems. We don't have answers, but these are good problems because they're going to help us build a better future.
So there would be some casualties in the interest of the larger ecosystem to develop, Karthik, but it's not necessarily new, because in renewable space, I remember more than a decade back, a lot of Wall Street guys with their money had come here and set up renewable assets here. And they said, this is the next future of energy. But it was just so expensive that the adoption didn't happen. And it happened after a decade. So a lot of them went bust as well. So it's the journey of
we've seen the 15
casualties.
rupee plant, right? But
Yes.
the thing is, you assume that you had the cash flows for 20 years because you signed the power purchase agreement for 20 years.
Right.
But you know what? The government can come back and say that the rest is operating at 4 rupees. So I want to come back and renegotiate with you. So these challenges exist. I think we're seeing that we've seen 1 or 2 of them happening over a decade, where you've seen dramatic like compression of costs and evolution of technology and real business models. We're actually seeing more of them. We're seeing them in a number of sectors now, just not in a few of them.
So disruption, and I think fintech is another area of disruption. So Anurag, my final question to you, I know we've like really extended this discussion, but disruption happens in most of the sectors. Your sector is one. Any thought on that? And one question I won't let you go without is growth versus profitability. How do you decipher that? That has been the biggest topic of discussion in this space.
Yeah, so I think all of us are looking at disrupting the existing ecosystem to expand. So it's part of the life. The only good thing, at least in our sector, I can talk about the penetration itself is so low. So actually all of us are right now solving for expansion rather than actually market share game. And a lot of us are solving for that. So at least for next, I would say a decade, we don't have to face that problem compared to, let's say, a lot of other developed
Your
markets.
disruption is of a different kind of from regulations.
Could be. And, as the economy grows, the pie itself is increasing. Whatever adoption we have been able to drive, that itself is growing. At the same time, the penetration itself is low. So I think what I'm trying to say is that disruption is part of the game. What the team has to keep an eye on the opportunity and the problem we are trying to solve.
So stickiness is there. We have seen that of fintech. But what about growth versus profitability?
So, as I said, you said it's a tough question, so there is no easy answer. But I guess one thing I just want to relate to the previous statement I made, that in financial services, one has to think long term. So, if I have to really trade off, we definitely can't trade off profitability beyond a certain point, because you got to survive. Financial services by design is a long-term business. I'm like, you will go through cycles. It's a cyclical business. It's linked to economic upside and downside. So I would say, if you push me to the corner, probably sacrifice a little bit of growth, but don't compromise profitability.
So you're saying balancing act. So very quickly, Karthik, to end this discussion, about growth versus profitability. Of course, when a lot of startups came to the public market, the VC world taught the equity, stakeholders that this is how we assess and analyze the companies. These are the matrices. And in difficult times, is the VC world now tilting towards how the equity public market, analysis has been for making investments?
The VC world is notorious for going up and down in terms of the sentiment at that point of time. But that said, if you take the overall generic view, right, I think there is a bit of momentum sometimes that you get carried away.
Yes.
But if you take the 50-year history of venture capital, it's always been around how we think about where you can spend money and grow, because you inherently have a very strong margin structure behind.
Right.
I think it's easy for us to just zoom in on what's happened over the last 2 years or 3 years and say that there's been a bunch of growth at the cost of profitability. But I think markets will, and I think there's a continuum of VC and capital markets, right? So I think everyone in some ways operates the same way. Sometimes we can see that you would see a lot more exuberance on growth than was desired, which potentially has happened across a period of time. But I don't necessarily see that there is a huge disconnect on how the private markets over a period of time view the balance between growth and profitability. Right? The metrics.
So that's an important takeaway coming from somebody who's an equal participant in that space. So on that note, Chetan, thank you so much. Anurag, Karthik.
Thank you.
It was a riveting discussion. I enjoyed it, and lots of takeaways coming in from the panelists on how entrepreneurship has been fueled over the years in the country. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nisha. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. It was a very exciting and very interesting panel discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. But we'd like you to stay back on stage, a quick photo opportunity. And of course, we'd also like to welcome Mr. Vineet Sukumar, our founder and managing director, to present mementos to our panelists and our moderator. Thank you for sharing your life experiences, talking to us about the obstacles you faced and how you overcame each and every one of them. And a special thank you to Nisha for wonderfully moderating this session. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time to tell them if you enjoyed this session, and the only way you can do that is by giving them a nice, gentle round of applause. Thank you. Thank you very much. A quick photo opportunity. We'd like to capture this moment in posterity, because as they always say, a picture speaks 1,000 words. Lovely. Thank you very much. And a special thank you once again to Mr. Chetan Maini. Thank you so much for joining us virtually, sir. We'll make sure that your memento reaches you in person as well. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout this summit, we seek to inspire the audience by bringing together game changers from various fields like business, education, nation building, and of course, sports. Speaking of sport, who better than the captain, the legend, the face of women's cricket who changed the gentleman's game forever? The first female cricketer to surpass 7,000 runs in women's ODI matches, the highest run getter in women's ODI cricket, the youngest female cricketer to score an ODI 100, and the only female cricketer to captain India in more than one ICC ODI World Cup final. I'm truly excited and super happy to welcome the one and only Mithali Raj, ladies and gentlemen, former captain India women's national cricket team. And to engage her in a candid conversation today, we've got a household name, somebody who brings about such engaging conversations, Mr. Gaurav Kapoor, GK. Very, very happy to have you here with us today. We'll have a nice conversation and we'll be witness to that as well.
Are you redecorating the place? What are you doing? You changed the curtains and all also. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? Good to see you. Hello. How are you? How's it going? Say hello. Say good evening, teacher. Come on. Good evening, children. Good evening. Are you all ready to have a bit of a laugh and have some fun? Yes? Yes? Let's hear you. Yes? They do very serious jobs all day, so we have to entertain them a little bit. I just want to know from the people who were here before, because we'll decide how much effort we put in. What was in those gift bags? It's just, is anybody here? Is anybody, Anurag? Is anyone here? Yeah? Achha, good? Good stuff?
When Gaurav was shown on the screen, he seemed like he was actually understanding what you gentlemen were talking. So make sure that you ask him a couple of questions.
Good acting, huh? That's what they say. That's what I didn't even know where I was looking. I was like, yeah, of course, I completely understand. Renewable energy, VC funding, of course, I get it all. I don't know why we're still standing. It's like we're first slip, second slip. First slip, second slip. Okay, we can sit down now. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start, I think that besides all the introduction and all the numbers and everything we give her, I think we can just very simply say that we are in the presence of one of the GOATs of cricket, one of the greatest of all time. Like, we can give all the stats and facts, but the fact is that you are one of the greatest of all time. I want to start off with one question. I don't know if people know, but it has been scientifically proven that your footwork when you were batting comes from all your Bharatanatyam training when you were young. Is that true?
Yes, because I started cricket when I was 10-year-old, but dance was much before that. Probably I was 8 or 7.5. And weekends would be dance. And obviously, I've learned classical dance, so it had a lot to do with keeping up with the beats. The faster the beat, the quicker your footwork has to be. So that really helped me to play the spinners well. So I play the spinners far better than I played the fast bowlers.
So, first of all, we have to thank you for your service to Indian cricket. For so long, you had such a long career. It obviously had all its ups and downs, so we're going to talk about that. But I think what we're going to focus on today, since the session is about game changers, I think, Mithali, we've seen, whether we see men's cricket, whether we see women's cricket, whether we see a lot of other sports, in terms of one individual having an impact in changing the game, I am hard-pressed to think of another individual across disciplines, across genders, across any sport, even in other countries. While you were going through that journey, I'm sure there were a lot of times where you would have thought, all right, maybe I'm done now. I can't do this anymore. You still get up the next day and fight. But did you go through those days? Were there days when your head hit the pillow where you thought maybe that's it?
Well, I don't think so. I've ever faced that. Maybe after the World Cup this year that I felt, it is time to hang the boots. Not in these 22, 23 years of international cricket. Of course, I had some ups and downs. The the phases that as athletes we go through, the lack of form, that also very less, maybe a couple of times, fortunately in such a long period. But I think the very purpose of playing for India, working hard, and there's no guarantee that I will score runs, but I found purpose in the responsibility of playing for India, the responsibility of taking the challenge of the batting lineup of the Indian team for a very long time, and the faith of my teammates that when I'm there in the middle, they know that we still have a chance to win. So I think I have taken that role as a purpose to get up every day in the morning and give it my best shot.
So you were, obviously you were, I mean, some people are leaders and some people are just shepherds. You've just shepherded Indian cricket through so many eras. There was a pre-BCCI era, and then there was the post-BCCI era. How much did life change with that? How much did you have to battle in that pre-era? Because I know that you've spent a lot of time, we've seen your battles on field, you've spent a lot of time in off-field battles as well, haven't you?
Well, of course, there is pre and post BCCI. There is also pre 2017 ODI World Cup and post that as well. I think pre BCCI, the biggest challenge has been the resources and the facility and the perception of people in general, the lack of awareness about women's cricket or women cricketers. And that was the biggest challenge to face. Post BCCI, yes, the financial things have come into play. So many players could extend their career because they don't have to, leave the game midway to find greener pastures because they were able to earn playing the sport. Earlier, it wasn't like that. But then the recognition or the acknowledgement that usually comes across when you play at the highest level and keep winning matches was still missing, maybe because we were not on television that often as the men cricketers, or the matches were not televised at that regular period. When the team did well in the 2017 ODI World Cup, and since then on, I think that has changed. We have our own personal fan base. All of us are brands in ourselves, and the sport has turned out to be a big brand. And a lot of these brands are ready to invest in the sport. With the women's IPL, the talks could be that next year we might have 5 or 6 team women's IPL. There is an under-19 girls World Cup next year. So I think major things are going to happen in the coming years. I think that's definitely good for women's cricket. I would say I'm fortunate to see all these changes, and my career has probably ran parallel to all of this. And I've had good, bad experiences, but I'm just grateful that I'm that one athlete who could go through all the phases of the evolution of women's cricket in our country.
Yeah, you haven't just gone through them, you have led them through that. So thank you for doing all of that. But let's just go back to the beginning. Let's go back to when you were a child and you were training and you would have to wake up at 4 in the morning and go to train, which I'm sure is not fun for anybody at that age to wake up at 4 in the morning and go train. And I'm sure that there was a lot of opposition at the time from whether it's friends of the family or extended family, etc. And your parents, they kind of shielded you a lot from that, didn't they?
Yes, I think there was a lot of resistance from my grandparents. Yeah, coming from south of India, a Tamilian family. Cricket was, leave alone cricket, sport was not even meant for boys in our family. So I'm a girl taking up a sport, and there was not a penny in this sport. So yeah, there's a lot of that, hard questions thrown at my parents. But I was too young to go through that experience, and of course my parents' support was huge for me as a girl, especially in our society where sports in 90s or 80s was predominantly meant only for boys, for men. And as a young girl, when I started playing cricket, all I could see was only 2 women, P.T. Usha and Maleshwari. There was only 2 women in sports that we used to come across reading the articles. So it was, I would say, a large part of those criticisms and the resistance was faced by my parents until I grew into an age where I could understand what they have gone through.
I mean, obviously there's there's one pressure that it's financially not viable, and the other is there's societal pressure, right? Because there is, I mean, I think a lot of people here would know that. I mean, the time when we were growing, I like how I've made everybody our age in this, but when we were growing up, sport was not a viable career. Like right now, there are kids who want to play, and I'm sure a lot of you have children that age, and you're probably pushing them and say, come on, get an IPL contract, come on, you know, play football, do something. It wasn't so at that time. But as a kid, you're not thinking that, right? As a kid, you're not ever thinking of financial, you're probably not even thinking of societal. You just want to get up and you want to play. So do you know when that came into you, when it moved from, let's say, dance to the obsession becoming cricket, when you realized that, oh my God, I really like walloping the ball to all parts of the ground?
See, I think that came quite early, I would say, because when I was in school, I started as a 10-year-old kid, so I was in 5th or 6th standard. And we used to have league games at that point of time in Hyderabad. And I remember, like, if you have to get your picture in the newspaper, even if it meant a passport size, you had to score 30 plus and get 2 wickets. And, you know, when I found my picture in the newspaper, and then when you go to the school, you become the star, the superstar in the school. Like all your schoolmates, like, you know, yaar tera photo dekha, you're the superstar, you're a star of the school, and you get these attention from your school teacher. You can just, you know, sometimes they let go of if you don't do homework and everything, or you're late for some class. So when you start to get that privileges in school, then you feel like this is a good career option. As a young kid, you're in school, you don't know like where you're going to go, you know, when you pass out of 10th, you don't know what you're going to do. But for that period, I think that is what probably like motivated me to take up cricket full time. Maybe dance was slowly fading away.
The VIP treatment. We all love the VIP treatment. Thoda sa milta hai, to then you want to do that thing again and again. Tell us about your India debut, because obviously a big moment, and then kind of anticlimactic. So talk us through that.
Well, my ODI debut was good, but the test was equally the opposite. Like the ODI I scored 100 and the test debut was 0. So the ODI debut, honestly, you know, is 16 plus, and it was a lot more relief that, you know, I scored runs than enjoying that stage, because coming from Hyderabad, before even I left the shows, a lot of people expected me to match up with Azharuddin, because apparently he scored 300s in his debut series. So that was huge for me. Like, you know, like 300 जहाँ पे 50 मार लो बहुत बड़ी बात है 100. So, but I went on to score 100, and I was relieved for a fact that at least my dad would be happy and proud that I scored 100. On a test debut, when I got out on a 0, I just faced 3 or 4 balls and I got out on a 0. I was very disappointed. So I told my very close friend of mine, I told her, yaar, debut ODI to 100 score kar liya, this is to 0. I don't know if I'm made for this format. She said even Sachin scored 0, it's okay. You'll go on to score a lot more runs. This is just one odd game. So I was like, I took a little bit of solace from that. At least she's thought about me like that.
Yeah, I mean, your career's been as long as him, so I think there are more than a few comparisons over there. And then, of course, then the world record comes. And the world record came in the same year as the double 100 came within 12 months of the debut, right? So things did change.
That was quite a turnaround, isn't it? Like, I think the year end, I scored, I made my debut. Year beginning, I made my debut, and it was in England in July, August that I broke the world record. I was just in my third game of the test, and it was not a planned thing, but they say, you know, that when you want something, and what was that Hindi dialogue that Shah Rukh says in that movie?
कि अगर कुछ सच्चे दिल से शिद्दत से चाहो तो सारी कायनात लग जाती है.
I think that was something like
I didn't do the correct impression though. Hey, अगर किसी
yeah, so I think that before the test, me and my friend were watching this game on television in England, because the first test was a draw. It was abandoned actually because it rained in England during that game. That was the last game, and we were heading back home. Disappointed ODI series where I scored. My batting scores were like a telephone digit: 2, 8, 7. So I was very disappointed, and I told my friend, I said, like, as a batter, this is not the scores that I intended to do. This is, really disappointing. She said, you have a test game, you score in those runs, it makes up for it, and we can go back home happily. Your dad would not scold you. So I said, okay, then again, there was a huge pressure on my shoulders to score runs in that test. So we were watching this game before that test, and there was this England batter who scored a double hundred. And the boys, the men, usually they do that fist pump and they jump in the air after scoring double hundred. So I told her, I said, what would that experience be, scoring a double hundred in a test? Leave alone here, यहाँ पे 50 नहीं हो रही test match में तो 200 तो बहुत दूर की बात है. She said, it is possible if you put down your head and just stick to what you do best. And that was the conversation. We went into the test match, and I ended up scoring double hundred. So I don't know how I did it, but sometimes they say, if it's meant to be, you just end up doing that.
That's what Shah Rukh says about cricket, right? As well. You get that double hundred, you have that world record, things are... But you still, when you see that test cricket for women, test cricket was not prioritized. I know you're an old schooler, like me. That's your favorite format, right?
You're wrong. That's not my favorite format.
Your favorite format is ODI. Yeah. Sorry, your favorite format is ODI. But test over T20.
Yes.
Yeah. So number 2 comes test. But is one of your kind of regrets that more test cricket was not played?
I would not say regret, but I would have enjoyed the experience, because test is something like, I feel it's the oldest format, most revered format among the cricketers. And, it's a format where it tests a player in every aspect of the game, whether it's endurance, your mental setup, your technique, and the way the game changes in every session, So I feel that I probably have missed out on experiencing that as a cricketer.
How many T20 cricket fans over here? Raise your hands. How many T20 cricket fans? How many? Okay, that's the least favorite format, so all of you can leave, please. Just please escort them outside. But how the game has changed, right? I mean, I'm not talking just about the women's game and how it's kind of changed destinies and paths for individuals. I'm just talking about the game of cricket. The game of cricket has changed so much in the last 25 years. It has probably in the last 15 years changed more than it changed in the previous kind of 50 years.
Yeah, I think with the inception of T20, a lot of it has probably affected for good in the other factors or the facets of the sport, in terms of marketing, publicizing it, or getting people to watch. And even the one-day format, the way the women play one-day format now, and the way the men play the test game. So I think in some way it has helped even to change our mindset to training, to fitness, how important fitness is, because in T20, the intensity is so high in those 3 hours and an hour or 15 minutes of first innings, that you don't get time to catch your breath. You're constantly moving with the game, which is happening on the field. So with that, I think the players have understood the importance of keeping themselves fit. In fact, now fitness is the topmost priority. It's become the number 1, whereas the technique or your game comes secondary. Whereas earlier, the game is first. Fitness to baad mein dekha, I can manage. So.
I remember meeting, I don't know how many of you know this name, but I remember meeting Graham Gooch, the former England. I love it, such good students. The ones who knew just started nodding their head immediately, so I could just tell. So Graham Gooch, once I met at his academy, and all the kids at his academy were training and sliding and, doing all these crazy warm-ups. And I looked at him and I said, Gucci, it's slightly different from your time, right? This warm-up. He says, yeah, in our time, the warm-up was stretch and a yawn, tea and a biscuit. I was like, that was it. Fast bowlers perhaps would do 1 lap of the ground. But now, of course, warm-ups, everything has become really serious. I think one kind of path I want to lead you down, which I think might be very valid and pertinent for people in this room. Because, everyone here is kind of in the corporate world, high achievers and stuff. But you reach a point where you're kind of actively leading. And then you reach a point where you want to kind of step aside and let kind of the youngsters go. So I think I'll equate that to you were captain for such a long time, and then you were not captain, but you were still in the team, and you still had that leadership role because the youngsters were looking up to you. So talk to us about that transition, and how did it change your outlook when you were on the field? I mean, it's obviously a little lesser responsibility because you don't have to kind of look at everything and field placings and stuff, but just that, the difference kind of between captaincy and then leadership.
Well, see, when you've led for so many years, it's, you know, even if you're not leading, you'll still be asked to share your experience. Sometimes, invariably, you're still wearing the hat of the captain when you're in the field, and you would say that, you know, I feel this could work, or this has worked before. So you're always trying to convey, you know, suggestions or advices to the captain. And as far as the youngsters are concerned, well, the last team the last time when I've played with, couple of them have not even born when I made my debut. So that is the difference. And usually they grow up seeing you, idolizing you. So I don't think I would say that the comfort level would be there. But yes, you can always share your experience, but at the same time, you should allow them to, you know, gain experience through their own circumstances. You know, you can't really spoon feed anybody. They will learn only when they go through those hardships. All you can do is support them when they fall. You know, as a senior player, you're there to back them and give them suggestions. But at the end of the day, they also have to go through those hardships to gain exposure and experience.
As a captain, how important is it to, because you take decisions, and sometimes I'm sure you clash with some of the players as well, how important is it as a captain or a leader to then later kind of sometimes admit that, no, you were right, I was wrong?
Well, it's not too hard if you have, because for me the fundamental rule when I'm making decisions is that, you know, it has to sync, or it has to go with the team's interest. That's the topmost priority for me. And I'm quite open to discussions, because there are many a times that a youngster would come up with a great idea, you know, fresh idea, because the youngsters have this elasticity of spirit, I would feel that, because their slate is empty. They don't actually weigh the ideas or verify it. Whereas when we go through certain experiences, when we have to take decision, we weigh it, the odds and the kind of how much, you know, what if it doesn't work, what are the circumstances, if it works, how it works. So sometimes to understand and learn and probably even give a ear to those ideas is a good thing. And for that, you as a leader, you have to be very open for suggestions and keep the room open for them to be expressive. That also creates a very healthy environment in the dressing room. And it is not like a tyranny where, you know, what you say is only the fact or should be followed. When I got captaincy, I was very young. I was probably 22 years, and I had absolutely no experience of leading any domestic side. So for the first couple of years, that was my notion about captaincy. I thought captaincy was power. You know, I can do anything and, you know, dictate and stuff like that. But when I was sacked in 2008, and for good 3 years, I think that was, you know, one of the best thing to happen. At that point, I felt it was unfair because I was a performer as an individual player, and it was unfair for the selectors to sack me. But when I look back today, that was important to change my perception as a captain. And after that, whatever I learned in those 2-3 years, I understood how the players look up to the leader and how do they want the leader to be. I was able to understand these things only when I turned out to be a teammate to them. And then later on, when I got the captaincy, I changed a lot of things in my own head. I saw captaincy as a way to serve my country, serve my team. There's completely a different perspective in my own belief towards leadership.
That's super insightful. I really like that. It's such an interesting way to look at the turn of events, because it takes me back to one of the incidents very early in your career when your teammate was a domestic game where your teammate got 100 and you fell short, and you were talking to your father, who said something very interesting to you.
Yeah, he told me, like,
You were
it's a
upset.
very normal thing to compare yourself, your own performance with your teammates, and being very competitive that I am, though I don't come across that way. I told my father, I said, when she can score 100, why I didn't score 100? Why I ended up into 90s? So he said, you are not being picked to compare yourself with your teammate. You're being picked so that you can be sometimes the supporting role to your own teammate, because at the end, the result has to be that you should be on the winning side. So your personal performance, it should matter only when the team is winning. Otherwise, even you score 100 on a losing cause, nobody cares because your team lost. Yeah.
So you're playing against the other team, not against your teammate, right? That's brilliant. Let's talk about some of the youngsters in the team, because you're saying some of them come up with suggestions, but a lot of them come up with TikToks and Instagram reels also, no? Right?
Yeah.
Have you been pulled into? I've seen you've been pulled into a few of those as well, right?
Very, I think recently, yes, because the current generation, like, given little moment, little time for themselves, they're constantly onto Instagram and those reels. They're like, Didi, yaar, you're very boring. You should come do something for us. So I shake a little bit, but I'm not too comfortable with that. But it is fun to hang out with some of them because they don't have any apprehensions about, when they come into the site. Usually when people don't know you personally, I come across like a stern person or a very serious person. Most of them, don't come up to me, but there are few who are very courageous and they come up to me. And there was this Yastika Bhatia, and she turned out to be this one youngster that I'm very fond of. The very reason is that she was the one who took me out for coffee. Usually it's the other way around. The senior takes the junior out for coffee to make things comfortable. But here as a junior took the senior most player in the side for a cup of coffee, and she chatted off for good 2 hours. And I was here thinking, this girl is very chatty.
What did she say to you when she came up?
She thought, this is the only chance, let me ask all the questions. Yeah. Even live, cricket, she apparently even asked me about, Didi, if I have to settle down, what sort of a person I have to look? How do I balance? I said, I'm not married. I can't give you any suggestion in those things, but I can talk about cricket. I can talk about how to balance it, but that choice has to be yours to find your own companion.
These millennials, I tell you, these millennials. But in terms of all these, in terms of these youngsters, right? These ones are, there's one generation or there's one whole batch who are very open. There have also been those who have been slightly kind of apprehensive coming up to you. Are there any of those stories that you remember?
I think the current lot only, there's, obviously I would not name anybody. But
We'll just try to guess then. Tell us the story, we'll try to guess. Give us a star sign and we'll guess it with that.
So we were playing this test match in England last year. I was sitting next to the youngest member of the team and another youngster on the side. So it was raining and the play was stopped for an hour. So I was, as usual, picking up the book and I was reading. And she probably wanted to start a conversation. So she first went to this player and they spoke something and I could hear because I was just sitting next and there was a little bit of buzz and she like, "Pooch, tu pooch, Didi se pooch." So she came up to me. She said, "Didi, आपका ये मैं आपसे कुछ पूछ सकती हूँ?" I said, "हाँ, पूछो." So she said, "ये आपका पहला trip है इंग्लैंड में." When she said that, it was so instant that the other teammate and me, I just slipped, my book slipped from my hand because it was pretty much almost 22 years. 22 years I completed and the first tour was in England. So probably they were saying that, she didn't gather that information. All she asked is, so we burst out in laughing. So I went and told Julu, I said, "Kya re tumhari, your junior," she came and asked me this. So Julu being the angry young woman, she spoke in Bengali, I don't understand Bengali. Blah, 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 she said, and that youngster, she walked out. I said, "तूने क्या बोला है?" Said, "अभी जाके रोएगी." I said, रुला दिया तूने उसको रुला दिया. So I went out, I said, and she had these tears in her eyes. I said, "क्या हुआ, क्यों रो रही है?" "नहीं दीदी, sorry, I didn't know about this. I said, it is okay. It was just a banter, fun thing. Abhi ro mat, because then people will start trolling me, saying that Mitali is so, this thing, she makes someone cry, youngster cry. I said, mere upar aa jayega yaar. So, nahi didi, sorry. I said, koi baat nahi, it's not necessary you have to know everything. But sometimes, thoda check kar lena. Ye TV ke samne mat karna. It is okay, you did this in the dressing room. But, yeah, so.
Julan is such a, I mean, you and Julan are the two pillars of Indian cricket. But it just, one thing that you said in the story just strikes out to me, is that, and I think everyone in this room will agree, what is it with Bengalis? Whenever they get angry, why do they always fight in Bengali? Like, why don't, we can't understand. Fight in Hindi or English, no, then all of us can understand. I've spent time. Is there anybody here who is Bengali? Are there any Bengalis in the room?
They would not raise it. Oh,
do you do this? When you get angry, do you then start fighting in Bengali? Your family members? Yeah, that older generation, that happens, right? Hey, youngster lag raha hai thoda iska. Thoda lag raha hai. This mustache looks like your first mustache. So it's just come. Enjoy your first shave. It's very nice. Great feeling. But yeah, they do that. But tell us about Julan, because you and Julan, for me, you guys are the two pillars of Indian cricket, right? You with batting, her with bowling. And just first your relationship with her, and then we'll get into kind of her characteristics, because she's such a hilarious and entertaining character. But first, just your relationship with her spanning over all this time.
I think when I saw Julan for the first time, it was in the under-19s. And I already played for India then. So I still used to play the under-19s back then. And she was this tallest among the players that we've played in that. It's a zonal tournament, so the 5 zones.
I think still is the tallest.
Yeah, she stands tall, and then all of us around her, the tiny. So I had a talk with this again, my closest friend. Rumeli there also was in the same, around the same time I saw her as well. So we spoke, and then I told her, I said, maybe I think this fast bowler is going to play for India before the all-rounder. And she asked me why. I said, because she got me out on the first ball. Since then, I think Julan is a very hardworking girl. There are times when I took inspiration from her as well on tours. When you feel that, okay, I've trained enough, and then you see this girl going and doing that extra bit of bowling, and then you feel like when she can do, I should also work a little more on my batting. So there were times you take inspiration from your own teammates, and she's been that person constantly along with me in the dressing room, and generation of players have come and gone, but both of us have pretty much seen most of the dressing room. So I think to have her around is a blessing, because sometimes when you need a teammate to be a friend, you can't really look down on youngsters to give you that shoulder. So she's been that person to me during those days when we lost close games, and you need somebody to just vent out. As a leader, you can't do that in front of your teammates or the entire team. But then at some point, you need somebody on tour to just express. And she would be that one person that I could talk to, because we are of the same age.
And she's also one of the, I mean, she's really a team player, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she's one person on field as well, who's... you're laughing because there's a story.
She's never, I mean, I don't know, despite being a fast bowler, she has so much of energy. I remember this Asia Cup in Thailand, where we were playing, and usually the fast bowlers, they go and field in some corner of the ground, whether it's third man or a fine leg. And the match was very tight. All of us were quiet on the field, and there was one player who was cheering. Somewhere from the corner of the ground was Julian. Like, come on. I was like, yeah. Everybody are quiet, thinking we are in our own world. And there's this one player who's encouraging all of us.
Sometimes you need that, right?
You need that.
Just kind of depressurizes the whole situation.
Yeah. Sometimes it's funny also. You need that smile on your face to ease things out, and she's that one person, yeah.
Let's talk about the 2017 World Cup. How many of you remember the 2017 World Cup and what the girls did then? Yes, what the team did. I think a round of applause for them, because they really kind of, and I'm sure all of you agree, I saw it happen. Like I saw it play out. Because social media just came alive. There was the semi-final happening, and you guys had come up till there, and then suddenly that match just, you could tell, sometimes things just build traction, and you're watching it happen almost real time, and you could see, there were people on Twitter going, get to a television, get to a screen, watch what our girls are doing, and it just moved. And then the final, because suddenly we realized that there was so much interest in all of you playing the final. There were so many people cheering you. But you were oblivious to all of this in England, weren't you? You had no idea that the entire country had got galvanized and was supporting you.
I think I think Twitter was relatively very new, at least for me.
For you, it was new.
At least for me, yeah. At least for
People
me.
here have been fighting there for 15 years.
In fact, my Twitter handle was hacked during the World Cup. And I told Veda, I said, who's got the time to waste, here understanding like what is my password and hacking my account of all, because I had probably 2,000 followers. I said, I myself am not very much on Twitter. And this guy turns out to hack my handle. So I didn't know how, how
But
things were back.
Veda told you that welcome to celebrity world.
Yeah,
no?
she said that. And I was like, so I was wondering, I didn't know about it. As you said, I was completely unaware of what was happening in India. Neither did my dad or my friends ever told me how things were panning out in India. Only when I landed after the finals that I realized how big the World Cup turned out to be for the team.
The enduring visual from that for me, and I know we've spoken about this and you're asked about this quite a lot, and I don't know if people remember, but it wasn't an on-field moment, it was an off-field moment when in one of the, was it in a rain delay or was it during the game, where the camera kept going to you and you were reading this really big fat book.
Yeah.
Right? Were you playing mind games with the opposition?
Well, that is something I've done for years, so I never thought that would be, in fact, hyped so much. I didn't know what was.
It
Was
is
there
such an
something
unusual thing. I don't think, first of all, we both know a lot of cricketers, right? Indian international, male and female. Reading in itself is quite a rare activity. Then reading while a match is going on, and that too, that was not a comic book. It's not a book with pictures. It was a proper, what was it, Atlas Shrugged or something, I think.
No, it was a Rumi.
There you go.
And that was probably the second time or the third time that I actually was reading that book.
वो एक बार में समझ नहीं आती है, I understand.
Yeah, first time you really can't understand not a single line in that. And I usually I used to carry Kindle with me. And ICC came up with the rule that, because Kindle can be connected to Wi-Fi, so you cannot have that on ground. Now, I didn't carry books. So I asked my support staff, the fielding coach, I said, if you have any, please, can I borrow? He gave me that. I said, what is this? The first time, I don't know who Rumi was, honestly. And I said, okay. Then I flipped the pages. I said, I can't understand anything. Samajh mein nahi aa raha, give me another book. So he said, you read 2-3 times. I said, am I applying for any, am I sitting down for exam that I have to read 2-3 times? He said, no, PJ, you read. I said, okay. Then I started to read and I found it quite interesting. Very intense, but was probably much needed for me during that World Cup. After that, I haven't touched that book. I tried to read it again, but probably it was not meant for me. At that point, it really was, yeah.
Did any of the youngsters get confused? Because I noticed that youngsters get very confused when they see a book because it's got no backlight and they can't zoom in and all, so they get a little confused.
They would say, दीदी आप कैसे पढ़ सकते हो यार, कितने दिन लगते हैं आपको ये इतना सा book पढ़ने के लिए? I said, if you allow me to read and you manage your performance, I can read like in 2 weeks. दीदी एक पेज पढ़ने से नींद आ जाती है. I said, तुम लोगों के लिए नहीं है. I said.
Did you manage to inculcate the habit in any of the youngsters? No. So big uphill task.
They don't, if they come out of social media, then I can probably give them a book, right?
They're only used to reading 240 characters. They can't read any more than that. Tell us about retirement and when you did. Did you feel this? What did you feel, first of all? Let me just ask you what you felt when you retired. Was it a sense of accomplishment, a sense of relief? Was it all of them?
See, a lot of people asked me if was it an impulsive decision or I was forced to take the decision. Um, I've always been a goal-oriented person. So if I set a goal, I achieve it, and then there is a next goal. Whereas after this World Cup was my goal, I set it, I finished World Cup, but I didn't have anything else as a purpose to go to the ground and do the hard work. I first had to go through and deal with the loss of the last game that we played in the World Cup. It was quite a disappointing one, and I had to deal with that. And then I took a decision of retiring. It's because if I have to force myself to go to the ground, I don't want to be that player just for the sake of it, because cricket and ground is very sacred to me. It's like a temple, and you can't cheat. You know within you, you might have to put up an act in front of the world, but you know within you that you're not there 100% from your mind. So you'd rather not, get onto the ground, and which I felt during the domestic. I went to the domestic season thinking that, okay, sometimes you feel when you lose a very tight game, you feel like, yaar, abhi bas ho gaya. You feel that. I didn't want to regret my decision, so I went to the domestic season to see that if I still have the passion to go out and bat. So the coach actually had to tell me, like, Mitali, go and play a few balls. I said that was enough for me. That I never wanted to come to that place where somebody else is telling me, go do the hard work. So I said, now is the time. I think maybe it's the right time to call it. So I did. So far, I've never felt, I've taken the decision too soon, and I don't even miss playing. I'm in a very content space. Yeah.
That's nice. That's what I guess we're all aiming for, right? In life, if we can feel that sense of contentment. And I think you deserve that contentment because of how selflessly you've served Indian cricket all this while. But, we talk about serious things. Let's talk about, while we round up this conversation, we'll open it for questions to people. Let's ask you some fun questions about your teammates, right? The life.
Am I meant to be crucified here, like asking you about
fun things.
Okay.
It's like the life of the dressing room. The one who is the most.
But you know that I've actually played like with 3-4 generations. So every generation have their own unique personalities in the dressing room.
We want to hear about all of them.
Yeah.
So tell us the life of the dressing room, the bright spark inside the dressing room.
Well, it has been Amita Sharma at one point, Ekta Bisht, Jemima, the current lot. All three keep the dressing room alive, yeah.
And which one of them plays the music, and what kind of music plays in the dressing room?
I think mostly it is Punjabi. I don't know, everybody have this liking for Punjabi.
Yeah, guitar!
In the bus, everywhere it's Punjabi or Hindi. Hardly I have ever heard an English song in the bus or in the dressing room. And if we, by mistake, if somebody plays an English song, ye kya ho gaya, ye humko samajh mein aata, change it. So, yeah.
Who did you enjoy batting with the most? Or who was the quirkiest person or the most fun that you had when you were batting with somebody?
I'm not someone who talks a lot, but there have been a lot of players who love to talk because probably that's how they deal with their nervousness. So I've enjoyed batting with Julian, especially the tailenders. I enjoy batting with the tailenders because when you play with the top order, even they are also trying to work. Didi, is the bat coming here? Field placement, all that technical aspect and the strategy. Tailenders. Ball यहाँ पे दीदी मैं तो अभी मार रही हूँ आप भागना I said हाँ ठीक है so they are in their own space so that lightens the thing so I enjoy batting with the tailenders.
But out of the tailenders, Julian, have you enjoyed most with Julian?
I've played a lot of innings with Julian, so that's why I say I've enjoyed it. But there are also tailenders like Ekta Bisht and Poonam Yadav. I've enjoyed batting with them. Yeah.
Have you ever had to tell them, "Nahi, ruk ja abhi. Mere run ban rahe, ruk ja thodi der."
Ekta Bisht, it seems like she's always on the skates. The minute the ball hits the bat, she's off. I said, कहाँ भाग रही है? हुसैन बोल्ट है क्या? तू रुक जा वहाँ पे. I said, there's no run. You will reach, but दीदी का तो ख्याल रख ले. I also have to reach the other end. You only have to take off. So yeah, she's also fun to bat with. Yeah.
अकेले अकेले कहाँ जा रहे हो? There is a story like that about Inzamam ul Haq and Wasim Akram that Wasim Akram tells a lot, where he says that once they decided to take a quick single, and Wasim bhai said that I touched the ball and I ran. He says I put my head down and I ran.
Yeah.
He
The
says,
tailenders do this. They put their head down and they run like a bull. They don't see कौन क्या है, ball कहाँ
yeah,
मारा
so
है.
he said, Inzamam told Inzi said run. So he said I ran. He says I reach the other end, I dive and I go down, and when the mud clears, I look up, Inzamam is standing there only. On the same end. And he says, Wasim says, he looks down at me and says, Wasim bhai, aap yahan? So yeah, they're interesting. Sometimes, I'm just trying to tell you, sometimes the senior batters can also sell the tail-enders down the river. Huh?
But I think they never feel bad if they get run out. That is one thing I like about the tailender. Whereas the top order,
Sacrifice.
they feel they'll throw the bat, shoes, everything, and they get pissed off. But the tailenders, they're like, चलता है दीदी कोई बात नहीं आप बस जिता के लेकर आओ.
I took a bullet for you.
Yeah.
Huh? I took a bullet for
Yeah.
you. Where would you like to see women's cricket in India in the next few years? Let's say if in the next 5 years, if you were asked what your vision is, what your dream is for Indian cricket, where would you like to see it?
I would want to see them as world champions. Yeah. I could not do that as a player, but at someday I wanted Indian team to win a World Cup. I wanted India's name on the trophy where you always have the teams which have won. You have those written like Australia, England, New Zealand. So I want India to be the first Asian country, at least in the women's section, to get India there.
And your toughest opposition during all this time, the one that you enjoyed competing or you thought brought the best out in you?
Well, undoubtedly Australia, because there was one time where Australia as a team was very strong, especially in times of Belinda Clark. They were very strong. And of course, the current lot with the league happening, the second string and the pool of players come in with a lot of experience and exposure. But that team was of a different level, yeah.
And which is the team that sledged the most?
England.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The stiff upper lip?
Especially Brunt. You know, but I enjoy her antics on the ground. You should have a character like that who keeps things alive on the ground. A fast bowler, of course, Julian comes close, but not on her own teammates. But I did have a run-up with Brunt, so I think I've enjoyed playing her. Very competitive player.
Has that ever happened as something is supposed to sledge but everybody just starts laughing?
It did. But I will not share that.
We'll have to wait for the next book to come out for that. Yeah? Maybe. Maybe. All right. We'll. If anybody has a question, does anybody have a question? Because I've got a few. Oh, there's a gentleman over there. If you can just pass the mic to. Oh, you're sitting right next to the sound person, so that's convenient.
Gaurav. Hi from Gaurav. Mithali, if you had to be in a super over situation, which are the 3 batters you will pick and who will be the bowler?
You know, she can't pick both, no? She
Yeah.
can either pick the batters or the bowler.
See, I will pick up Shefali Verma. She is my current favorite. Going by the form, of course, Smriti is there. Shefali and Smriti. And, well, I would pick Harman as the third batter. Yeah.
And the bowler should pick you because then they can score the runs. It'll be easy. Next question. Gentleman all the way at the back. There's a gentleman at the back.
Mithali, slightly technical.
But he has a
one.
mic with him. Ghar se laye kya? It's amazing. Wow.
I got it from home.
Oh, well done.
It's slightly technical one. In 22 years, the bat has changed a lot. How do you think the bat has changed women's game? Men's game we see, but what about the women's game?
The bat.
It becoming heavier, it becoming more powerful.
I don't think it is getting heavier. It is only getting lighter because the speed with the bowlers are bowling is getting faster, in fact, in terms of women's. Because earlier we were somewhere around 107 in 2009 kilometer per hour, and slowly today I think the fastest women cricketer can bowl is around 128. So I think you can't play with a heavier bat. You would rather play with a lighter bat, and I think that is where things have changed over the years, even in women's cricket, that with fitness and the T20, a lot more bowlers are trying to aim the head of the batter. They are bowling many, bounces. So yeah.
I think it's becoming denser, basically, right? I mean, there's just a lot more technology coming into the bats.
Yeah, but then, it doesn't mean, it might look thicker, but it's not heavy.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any question? There's a gentleman there, also next to the sound person. Well done.
Yeah, hi. So, Gaurav mentioned that a lot of similarities between you and Sachin, which is very correct. And one of them is the hunger for runs that sustained for years. So how do you sustain that hunger? It's natural, or you set some targets over years? How do you sustain that?
See, in terms of batting, setting targets never worked for me. Because the day I thought today I'll score 100, I ended up scoring 20 or 30 runs. It was a disappointment. And I understood that very early in my career that I cannot go in with that mindset. But yes, I wanted to be a consistent player. Like every match, I set a standard of my own. For me, scoring a 50 was minimum, in a game. Anything lesser would be like, I didn't score runs that day. So that's the standard I set for myself, and I try to aim that every game. And I would rather be a consistent player than, a player who's inconsistent. Sometimes they score big, but for good 10 innings, they don't score runs. So if you're consistent, that's when your team is dependent on you. You'd rather be a dependent player for your team.
And consistency is so right. Your average in ODI at the end of your career is 50, right? 50 point something. So there you go. I think that deserves a round of applause. 50 is insane average in ODI cricket. Consistent. Okay, we can take one last question. Anybody else? Gentleman right at the front. We'll get you a mic, sir. We have many. There comes. There, Hussein is coming.
Hi, Mithali. See, when you scored your double 100, how important was the role of the non-striker in helping you reach the milestone?
Well, it is important. And I've always believed that there are match winners, but there are also supporting players. Like the role of a supporting player is to make the things easier for a match winner. You can't have all 11 as match winners. And that's where I think when you play a match-winning innings, there's always somebody else who's also playing, a quieter role. And in that innings, I had 3 partnerships with Anjum, Hemlata Kala, and then Julan. So with Hema, it was more that, she was a very good player at that time of spin. So we had a talk like, she would tell you face the fast bowlers a lot more than I'll play the spinners. With Julan, by then I was already tired. I was a 19-year-old and I was batting with a 1.5 kg bat, quite heavy for a teenager. So I told her like, I'm really tired, lifting the bat, my forearms are hurting. So she was the one who told me like, few more overs, let us play through this session. So even that role can be played by a non-striker, to be just there emotionally supporting you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. One last, anybody? Have we covered everyone? There's, the gentleman right here. Can we just pass the mic?
Hi, Vitali. So I just happened to see the movie based on you last weekend. I want to know how close is that character to the real you?
Yeah, lawyer हो सकता है. Be careful. You're a lawyer, huh? ID check करो इनका.
Well, it is close because I did share my journey with them. So yes, it's pretty close.
Don't downgrade the answer. Stay at yes. stayed, yes, you pretty close pakad lenge isko.
Well, see,
There's some
not lie
cinematic
for a-
liberties.
Yeah.
Have to be taken.
Yeah.
There you go. Some cinematic liberties have to be taken. This is our equivalent of well left. Bouncer maroge? Well done. Okay, well that's it. I think that's all we have time for. We're getting thumbs ups from the corner. So yes, that's all we have time for. So, ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for the GOAT, Mithali Raj.
Thank you, Vitali. Thank you, Tricky. It was just fantastic to listen to. I'm going to request both of you to stay back on stage. Can we have our founder and managing director, Mr. Vineet Sukumar, please join us on stage, and we'd like you to present mementos to an absolute legend and icon. Mithali, thank you for being so real, so candid, and sharing such fun stories with us. And GK, as always, you bring such an entertaining side of any person that you interview. Thank you. Keep the great work going. And Mithali, keep inspiring and motivating us. Thank you so much for being here. Let's get a quick photo in. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Mithali. Thank you, GK. Thank you, Vineet. We'll get you back in just a bit. Ladies and gentlemen, we just definitely have to say that it's been such a wonderful evening, and it's certainly not even close to getting to the end of it. But we've had such a plethora of fantastic and eminent speakers in the house. We definitely have Vivriti Group to thank for that. So right now, we'd like to share with you a journey full of successes, highs and lows, milestones, but most importantly, stories. Here are the 5 wonderful years that the Vivriti Group will certainly like to share with you. Let's take a look at the audiovisual presentation.
This is the story of a beginning. The beginning of the transformation of India's mid-corporates, over 20,000 of them that today employ over 3 million people and drive India's economy. It was in 2017 that a team of 8 set off on a journey to create a market that never existed before. They saw the market failure that existed in the lack of supply of necessary debt to rich corporates. There was a need for a vision. And then, Vivriti was born. The journey of Vivriti is the story of a vision. A vision that billions of dollars of international and domestic capital could be channeled to transform the journey of thousands of India's entrepreneurs in the mid-corporate space. Vivriti had to sculpt this transformation engine meticulously. Complex risk underwriting on disparate sectors, highly customized debt products to meet varied client needs, digital pan-India acquisition, and the credibility to attract the largest pools of capital globally. The journey of Vivriti is the story of resilience. The Vivriti Group navigated the toughest fight. enterprise tech for enterprise risk assessment, monitoring, product complexity and delivery as well as distribution was near wholly absent. From building a first-generation technology team to developing core enterprise tech, Vivriti has completely reimagined the delivery of credit to enterprises, portfolio management and distribution. The journey of Vivriti so far has been so fascinating in its development of enterprise tech completely bottoms up. This is the story of technology. Vivriti is a people-centric organization that imbibes the values from its founder and that makes it a great place for the employees. Our team, lenders, investors and our clients have been the equal partners in our progress. We believe that every small step of an individual takes us closer to achieving our milestone. The journey of Vivriti is the story of people. A journey that started in Chennai has now spread to the corners of India. This journey has resulted in the emergence of the first specialized provider of debt to India's mid-market enterprises, a segment that did not exist. Vivriti Group now engages over 500 enterprises across 35 sectors and has delivered over 11,000 crores of capital originating from 3 continents. Vivriti will become India's gateway for mid-market performing credit. We are all set to be the game changer and write the story of the future.
What makes Vivriti different is our empathy for our team, our connect with our team and the drive that we infuse in our team to become greater. We aim to hit our targets in the next 5 years and there is absolutely no substitute for hard work for us to get there.
Ladies and gentlemen, they always say that it is not the destination, but it is the journey that counts. And what a journey it has been for the Vivriti Group. A big round of applause once again because they truly have been game changers themselves. It is now time to welcome on stage the founder and managing director of Vivriti Capital and Vivriti Asset Management, Mr. Vineet Sukumar.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming and gracing our event. I'm frankly quite choked. I think that the entire team at Vivriti is quite emotional today in terms of seeing this kind of a turnout and seeing all of you here with us today. We've come a long way in the last 5 years, and frankly, it is only because we could stand upon the shoulders of giants, and that's the only way we could have come so far. So once again, thank you, all of you, for helping us coming so far. A big round of applause for all of you. But enough about us. This event is entirely about game changers and about people who have inspired us, and that's been the theme for today. And we have more to see as the evening unfolds. I thought I would take a couple of minutes to take you through 2 examples of game changers and their own unique way of thinking that have personally inspired me, right? And to make it a bit interesting, I thought I'll put up a couple of pictures on stage, on the screen, and see if some of you guys can, the quizzers in the room can guess what these are about, right? And I'll tell you a little story about them as we go around. Coming up. Any guesses, anybody, on what this represents? This is at the Oscars, first hint. And the second is, it is prior to World War II. It's nearly 100 years back. So the story goes as such that in 1934, the Walt Disney Company had possibly a staff of 200 people and was already a very successful short feature film company for animated films. And at that time, Walt Disney took on a big bet that he would make the first long animated feature film. People thought he was crazy and completely dissuaded him. It turned the company almost bankrupt. It took him as long to make this film as it took to make Bahubali. It took nearly 5 years. It took $1.5 million at that time, princely sum of money. This film, by the end of 1938, became the highest grossing film of that year and earned $6.5 million. Can anybody see the picture and guess what that film should be? Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, that's right. An absolutely inspirational story of somebody who kind of really stuck to conviction, took huge risks, which had a massive payoff. The next picture is probably more familiar to those of us who are students of finance in the audience. Much more recent, just it's in the current century. Anybody on what this represents? No? In 2007, Warren Buffett entered into a bet with the entire hedge fund industry. He said that the index fund could deliver more returns than a portfolio of hedge funds over a 10-year period. And he bet $1 million against it at that bet. A hedge fund manager took up the bet. While the bet was to go from 2007 to 17, in 2015, the hedge fund manager conceded defeat. This is the picture of the returns that ensured. Warren Buffett, by investing in a Vanguard fund, clocked 85% returns in gross. None of the 5 hedge funds that were there in the portfolio could even come close. The average was 22%. This just goes to show that when you approach the problem of investing absolutely bottoms up, right? I mean, hedge funds were the fad. Even now they continue to be the fad, but Warren Buffett said that if you're a manager and you're at 0.04% of fees, which is what Vanguard was charging, versus the hedge fund industry at 2% and 20% of carry, this is what would happen. And he was proven right over a decade. So I think these are just kind of great examples to show, to inspire us on and possibly guide us in our way of thinking on how we must be bold, how we must take bets, how we must stick to conviction, how we must think absolutely bottoms up. Because this graph over here, probably all of you are aware of. This is about the pace of technology, right? We all talk about the startup J curve, about the hockey stick curve of growth, right? And as you can see, the car took probably 110 years to cross 70% of penetration. Mobile phones have taken 3 years on the extreme left to achieve 30%, right? And this is probably quite a dated graph, frankly, that I could pick off the internet. But it just goes to show how the pace of technology is changing and therefore what the game changers in the room need to do just to keep pace with the times, why it is so important for us to be alert. I think the future is coming up very, very fast and it will take all of what we have to weather it. I'll stop here. We have a lot left in the evening, but thank you so much for coming and it's a real pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to welcome our next speaker for the day. An innovator, academician, environment activist, and an education reformist. Meet the founder of Students' Educational and Cultural Movement in Ladakh, an innovator who has changed the game for farmers, an educationalist who has changed the game for students, a social entrepreneur who has changed the game for soldiers, and ladies and gentlemen, a revolutionary who has changed the game for a community. Please put your hands together as we welcome on stage none other than Mr. Sonam Wangchuk. Mike?
Okay. Okay. Good evening and Jule as we greet in Ladakh. I bring warm greetings from the cold desert that Ladakh is. I flew this morning to come to Mumbai, the warmth of Mumbai, and here I found particularly welcomed and made to feel at home in this overly air-conditioned hall where I'm shivering like I don't do in Ladakh also. And then I look around and see that I have come dressed for Mumbai, but you all have come dressed for Ladakh. This has always puzzled me, but slowly I understand why the planet is warming up. Anyway, again coming down from Ladakh to big cities like Mumbai, New Delhi or New York, I sometimes feel very sad. Sad because I see people around sad and complaining about problems of this kind or that kind, challenges and so on. So I thought I should tell you a little bit about Ladakh so you know what problems are, what challenges are, if you think what you are missing are challenges, yeah? To begin with, when you are in a place like Ladakh, even breathing is difficult. As simple as breathing is difficult. You think you have shortage of this and shortage of that, even oxygen is in short supply. So you can imagine what problems there are. We remain cut off from the world for 6 months of the year, half the year. In 2 months or so, Ladakh will start closing down with all passes snowed in and we'll be left to ourselves for the next 6 months till next spring. So then I think it's more in the mind that you could have nothing but be very happy, or you could have everything and yet have so many problems. So therefore, growing up in a place like Ladakh, you learn to make the most amidst adversities. And that's what my story is, and that's what Ladakh's story is, of people making the most. And just to tell you that despite all that, the winters that are -20 to -30, and then climate that, altitude that is closer to outer space than planet Earth. We are like 11,500 feet closer to outer space than terra firma, the normal surface of the planet. So, yet there are no people who are hungry. Nobody dies of cold. In fact, there is no capital as you all are discussing, but there is a huge social capital that keeps people supported. On top of all these problems, we have no oil in the ground to heat our winters, or wood in the mountains to do so. Looks like nature was rather unfair. Left us, as they say, high and dry. No rain from the skies. We have a precipitation of just 4 inches in a whole year. You would think people would be very, very sad and depressed. But no, as I said, I have not seen anybody die of hunger or cold or so. In fact, when people in this very challenging place When I say very challenging, many of you may not understand because you get to see only 5 months of Ladakh when things are all hunky-dory. But the rest of the 7 months is the real Ladakh. Yeah? Yet, in these challenges, when a Ladakhi throws up a marriage, they invite 5,000 people and have a great feast. And the one who is hosting it has to pay nothing, zero. Isn't that interesting? Similarly, when there is a death, a funeral, many say that Ladakhi funerals are much more colorful than most births and marriages elsewhere. The family who has this sad event has nothing to do from day one. They just sit there meditating or mourning. It's everybody else who's working, and thousands of people come and feast and go. On a funeral now I'm talking. Again, the family has nothing to do. This I call social capital, which is much, much more important than financial capital. So it's social capital, innovative, creative ways that come when things are tough. When going gets tough, tough get going. So when nature kind of curses us, people bless themselves with innovative solutions. On the contrary, I see in most parts of the world, nature blesses them and people curse themselves with denuded forests and overfished oceans and polluted land and water and air and so on. So over here, when it is a wedding, everybody else gets to work. From first you have spiritual relatives, not blood relatives, who take charge. Then the blood relatives, then the neighbors, and everybody pitches in the expenses, even furniture, so much so that actually the family ends up gaining with some money extra coming into the house, yeah? Because everybody else takes care of it. And you do the same throughout, slowly investing into everybody else's. Same with funeral. Whenever this mishap happens, the spiritual relatives start working and the family has to do nothing. To ensure that they have to do nothing except mourn and meditate, these people will even take care of the cows, the fields, and so on. So finally, thousands of people who come and meet them come comfortably and go without any trauma other than the mishap that has happened to the family. So it is these kinds of beautiful solutions that come out when nature is not so generous that I grew up seeing as innovative solutions in a place like Ladakh. Yeah? Similarly, nowadays, environmentally speaking, we have glacial melting at a very fast rate, which causes droughts, and those are followed by floods and the other year. So we are in the middle of all kinds of natural calamities as well. None of them are doing, for example, climate change. We can't do much except receive it. So floods and droughts, and in any case, on top of that, earthquakes. We are in zone 5 and 4 of earthquakes. So all such challenges are there. Some are natural, some are man-made. For example, educationally speaking, when I was growing up, I saw a situation where children were failing en masse in schools 95% of the students would fail every year, repeatedly, consistently. 5% would barely pass. And yet the system would blame the children for being, almost retarded. Some of the teachers who would come from across the mountains, from Kashmir and so on, would even devise pseudo-science around it, saying these Ladakhi children will never pass. They don't have enough oxygen in the air. And for children, if their teacher tells them, you can't do anything and there's not enough oxygen, what can you do? You just give up. You can't fabricate oxygen, so you might as well give up. So that was the kind of situation in Ladakh, and you can imagine what challenges people face. So while Ladakh is a land of challenges, I think it is also a land of solutions. People have come up with all kinds of resourceful, creative ways, because of which, as I said, despite the temperatures, nobody dies of cold. They die in larger numbers in Delhi of cold than in Ladakh. Similarly, when it came to education, some of us started saying that this should not be acceptable. When 95% of the children are failing, it's not the children failing. It's the system failing, and we better overhaul the system. Whether it is in a software factory or a car factory, if 95% of the products fail, then we better change the system. So I'll share in the first part a little bit of our work in changing this game of education in Ladakh from this dismal failure to something better, to something that could perhaps change the way education is done in the world. Not just for ourselves, but for the rest of the world also, because we at our end see the extreme of its problems, and being victims, we have every right to change, and therefore we started changing. So I'll share first a little bit about how from ritualistic schools we started working on making schools and the books in there a part of solution for real life problems of the people, so that they are not just for passing exams, paper exams with paper knowledge, and then with paper degrees you come out, but rather something that actually uses the outcomes and the processes to solve the cold winters of Ladakh, which are like polar. Similarly, there is melting glaciers, droughts, floods. How can you use the school curriculum to solve these problems? And seeing this work with school level students and even the failing students in these schools, we thought, why not take it upwards and extend it to university level education. So we are now working on an alternative university, which will again engage the young people in applying what they learn in the classroom, not just keep memorizing and writing exams, but little learning, much application in the real world, so that we can further change the world around. Because young people in their 20s should not be caged in classrooms. They are at the prime of their youth. They should be changing the world, and education should be about that. So I'll share a little bit of that, and then come to my journey of how I got into that. Because if I just started with my journey, as I was told, it will not be easy to put the context in place. So to do that further, I thought, yes, more than 1,000 words, images and visuals will do better. So we'll do a little video to give you an image of what kind of place I'm talking about, so you can feel that context, and then we'll go further. This part is about the education reforms in schools, and then the beginnings of our work in using that experience to change the higher education system. And after that, we'll go into how the journey meandered around these events. Okay, can we have the visual?
I've never let my schooling interfere with my education. So said Mark Twain. How about you? Do you miss your school or college days? You perhaps do, but perhaps not for the classrooms and teachings. You actually perhaps wished every day that the school be closed the next day so you could stay home. But here's a school in Ladakh where the most dreaded punishment is to be sent home for 2 weeks, where students learn by doing things, where they engage in various innovations to solve real-life problems like climate change, where they run the school themselves like a little country with an elected government and learn management and governance that way, where they learn communication by running the campus newspaper and radio, science by designing and building their own school, solar-heated mud buildings that stay at plus 15 even when minus 15 winters. Kindness and compassion through introspection and meditation. A school where the criteria of admission is not your percentage, but that the conventional system has failed you. Hi, I'm Sonam Wangchuk from Ladakh, a remote mountain region in the Indian Himalayas. 25 years ago, when I was finishing my own engineering education, I saw that schools were a pain for everyone, but for mountain children, it was doubly painful and irrelevant. Children who spoke Ladakhi or Tibetan at home were made to sit all day memorizing in alien languages like Urdu or English. F for fan, S for ship, T for train. Till recently, every year, 95% of the students used to fail in the all-important 10th grade exams. Together with like-minded friends, we launched SECMOL, the Students' Educational and Cultural Movement of Ladakh, and said enough is enough. Working with the government, we rewrote many textbooks, retrained the teachers, and organized the villagers. And the results started changing too. For those who still failed, we started the alternative school that you just saw. And the results? Tewang Rigzin went on to become a top journalist and later became the education minister of Ladakh Hill Council at 27. He had failed his 10th grade 5 times. Stanzin became a filmmaker and has been winning awards across countries. He had failed 4 times. Miss Tinless is today a celebrated social entrepreneur. She had failed 3 times. But now we see that the state of higher education is no better. Not only for Ladakhis, who of course are doubly disadvantaged again, but for you in the big cities too. It's time we change this. We in Ladakh are dreaming again. This time our dream is to create an alternative university that will use all our learnings from the past 25 years. Once again, a hands-on doers university, where the School of Business runs real-life companies on campus. The School of Tourism runs high-end hotels and simple homestays. The School of Education runs innovative schools. The revenues from these sustain the university while the students get free higher education and of course hands-on experience. But this is more than a dream now. His Holiness Chetan Rinpoche, one of the top spiritual leaders in Tibetan Buddhism after His Holiness the Dalai Lama, is supporting this cause as the chief patron. The Hill Council government of Ladakh has earmarked roughly 200 acres of land, and the ice stupa artificial glaciers have already started greening this desert. A fully solar-heated, mud-built university township is being planned by some of India's top architects. Together, let's start the next learning revolution, where education is not limited to just the 3 R's, all too much to do with the head alone, where skills of the hands and kindness of the heart are given equal importance. Sure, it would take significant financial resources to materialize this ambitious dream. Recently, I was awarded the prestigious Rolex Award for Enterprise for the ice stupa artificial glaciers.
Sonam Wangchuk.
I contribute my Rolex Award as a seed for this cause. Thank you very much. I have decided to contribute the roughly 1 crore rupees as a seed fund to finally raise 150 crore rupees for the first phase of the project. And I very much hope that you all will join me and match this contribution according to your capacities. Together, we can change the face of higher education forever, not just for Ladakh, but for the whole world. So join us. The future has already begun. Thank you. Thank you. This was made few years ago as a pitch for a crowdfunding campaign for a People's University of the Mountains. And at that time, it was seeded by this Rolex Award of 1 crore, and I thought that would be a great way to start. I can ever make such a contribution, but thanks to the interest and all kinds of events and awards that kept coming, I've been able to contribute every year more than 1 crore rupees for this initiative. Yeah. So, and the concept of a university where young people do not only scribble on paper but actually go out and change the world has started taking off. Already, projects like solar-heated shelters and homes has not only taken off among local people, tourism industry, but also Indian Army and Indian Air Force. Already our School of Architecture is busy with Indian Army to make the border along the Chinese border, all the shelters zero energy, non-polluting, and you can imagine how cold it is for the soldiers. And when they use these kerosene burners, there are fire accidents, they never heat up enough, and there's so much pollution and emission. So all that gets taken care, and in the process, the institute earns its expenses from such outcomes of its academics. So this is the idea that universities of the future should be where young people change the world and gain experience and go out to change, rather than go out to seek experience from employers at their expense. So this is just an update about it, but I wanted to share a little bit of my journey. As I was asked, I thought without the context, journey wouldn't mean much. So in this Ladakh that I described, remote and difficult and challenging and so on, not for the Ladakhis, people from outside who look up to Ladakh find it so. For us, it is a lot of fun. So in this region, in an even farther away and a tiny village, I was born. In fact, the village was so tiny that it had only 5 households. 5 households back then. Now it has grown, in your financial terms, 100% to become a village of 10 households. Yes, still a little smaller than Bombay. But anyway, so being such a tiny village, like I said, Ladakh, we don't have many resources, this and that. We didn't have a school in the village. Now, many people think, what a pity this child didn't have a school. But looking back and looking around at schools, I think that was the best thing ever happened to me. Because I saw how schools break perfectly fine children much later. At the time, no, I didn't know. I was busy playing with the sheep and goats and climbing apricot trees and jumping into the Indus River and learning a lot, which is what we don't know. We think that's all play, and learning is what happens in those schools. Actually, I was learning much more. I found out from my friends, the so-called school friends, that I was learning on the farm when I was seeing a seed go down, roots go deep, shoots come up, leaves unfurl. I didn't have to go through this L-E-A-F, leaf, L-E-A-V-E-S, leaves, kind of mumbo jumbo. I was spared all that. I was in direct contact with nature's phenomena. And I learned. Till 9, I had no schools. After 9, I was dragged into a school, and there ended my true learning. But anyway, I learned that learning doesn't happen from schools and textbooks and teachers. Actually, learning, and people ask me, how did you become an innovator and problem solver? I would call myself more. I learned that it's a different curriculum it takes to become a problem solver than your KG and what do you call this? LKG and UKG and all such things. So the curriculum that it takes to become a problem solver, I found from my learning, and to share with you a little, are things like curiosity. Curiosity that comes loaded with every child is the secret of learning, not the textbooks, not the teachers. If you're curious, teacher or no teacher, you will learn. If you're not curious or it has been killed, best of teachers, best of schools, you will not learn. And curiosity is something you don't get from schools. It comes preloaded. This is one software, the best software in the world, I would say, that comes preloaded on the hardware when it arrives, the human baby, and learning software. And that made me learn. Curiosity, not teachers. Actually, I saw that most schools and even parents break this very tool of learning, delete this software, and then wonder why the thing is not working. That's what happens in most schools. Whereas that didn't happen. Thanks to my tiny little village, I was always curious, asking farmers questions, asking neighbors questions, wondering why animals do this, birds do that, and so on. And not only that, it helped me learn languages and science and so on. I grew up on a farm speaking nothing other than my mother tongue, Ladakhi, till 9 years of age. But then I was so curious, every time a tourist would pass, and Ladakh had just opened for tourism, I would bother them with all kinds of questions, learn, and I would look at them as walking atlases, from France, the chapter on France, and chapter on England from English tourists, and so on, and the language. And I ended up learning some 9 or 10 languages, mainly from such people as tourists, and later radio, which anybody can use, but most don't. So we often are always complaining about what we don't have, but never think of the radio as a teacher. Now, internet is even more sophisticated, but back then I learned my English mostly from tourists and the radio, apart from teachers who wonderfully stimulated me to learn much later, some teachers. So curiosity is the first pillar of problem solving, even in a harsh place like Ladakh. But curiosity alone is not enough. It can be monkey curiosity, just to entertain yourself. To become a problem solver, you need more than that, and that is empathy. That is a feeling for others' pains and problems and wanting to solve it. Now, this you don't get from schools. From school, you get how to compete and how to give problems and how to step on others and compete and cutthroat compete. That's not empathy. This I learned more from my mother than any teachers or any school, because my mother was always concerned. She was not schooled, but highly educated in my terms. And she would always be concerned about others. The first calf from the cow and the milk would go to the neighbor first. Anybody who's passing by would get things to eat, drink, and so on. And that made me learn to care about others' problems. Much later, I see that that's true for businesses. Businesses that really click for generations are those that actually solve a real problem. There are businesses who just are for profits. There are even businesses who create the problems they seem to be solving, like these viruses for computers. Some of them are actually, I think, created by the people who want to do that business, but that business doesn't go very far. So even in business, empathy, if it is powered by, it's a business that really is loved and lasts for generations and is playing a role in society. So that's what is the second pillar I feel I've learned. The third pillar, because empathy alone is not enough. It will make you feel bad about everything, or it will be just like a wishful thinking or a prayer about may everybody not have any problems, but they will have problems. And to surpass that and actually make people happier is the spirit of initiative. Not just empathy alone, but initiative to go out and do it. And again, that I, of course, had no schools to learn, but I learned it more from my father than any others. He would always be going out and doing it and not just sitting hand on hand. Whether it was a broken handle on the door or an unfair system in society, he would change it. And that, I think, is what finally makes things change. So later, as I was dragged into schools, I had a hard time first in the schools because I spoke no Hindi, no English, and teachers didn't seem to care why I didn't speak. They would just consider me this bad student and make me sit in the last row. Sit is actually wrong. Stand on the last row. And I think I spent more time sitting outside the class, outside the door than inside. But at least that way I can call myself also somewhat outstanding, no? Where today stand. But with the foundation of curiosity that had helped me learn about everything, I very soon caught up. I quickly caught up English, Hindi, the physics of things that I had already seen and the maths of things that I'd already done. And I caught up and started doing quite well. And around 11th grade, I was fascinated by physics and science, and then came across this chapter on lenses and mirrors. Now, this was so fascinating. I started imagining how these large concave mirrors, that was in the physics chapter, could be used to harness sun from the skies through the focus and put into cellars underground in Ladakh to grow vegetables and so on. And I started asking people, where can I learn more about these things? Because people were all confused in my classroom about becoming doctors or engineers, and I didn't know why. But there I started asking, what I want to do this, use this to change Ladakh. And an uncle of mine said, you could learn about such things in mechanical engineering. So my decision was made, mechanical engineering. And I studied for that, and 1 year later I was in engineering college, happily so. The first year went very happy because there was no choices to be made. All students from every branch were studying together. That year ended and I ran into a huge calamity. My father one day asked, "So what branch are you choosing?" And I, with bright eyes and bushy tails, said, "Mechanical engineering." And he said, "Why mechanical?" "I love these lenses and mirrors." "Stop kidding. You don't choose your subjects like that," he said. "You should choose civil engineering." "Why?" "There's more scope for that in Ladakh. There's nothing for mechanical engineering in Ladakh." And I said, "But that was not the reason why I chose engineering. It was just for these lenses and mirrors." He said, "Don't argue. If you don't do that, don't expect a penny from me." Now, some voice from within, contrary to what he expected, stood up and said, "Thank you very much," and left the room. "I'll do it myself," I said. And outside the house on the steps, I was scratching my head and thinking, it's easier said than done. How do I now finance 3 very expensive years in an engineering college? I don't know anything. I was not strong enough to move rocks or, work anywhere. So I thought, I'll teach. I'll teach students in Ladakh who I had observed were in trouble, failing in large numbers and so on. And with that empathy, but more than empathy, this compulsion to earn my own expenses, I decided to go back to Ladakh in the vacations. We used to have winter vacations, so in the vacations I went back to Ladakh. I'm sharing a little bit of my entrepreneurship journey, as most of you are entrepreneurs. It was a winter. I was 19 by now, and I had to fend for myself. There was no support over my head. So, but some crazy strength or foolhardiness would drive me and drove me to a hotelier in Leh and said, "Can you, sir, lease me your hotel?" In those days, all hotels were very small, but I went to one of the larger ones and said, "I want to lease your hotel." And actually, I didn't have money for my next lunch in my pocket. And the hotelier somehow perhaps was taken by my confidence, and it was winter anyway, so he said, "Yeah, why not? For 3 months I can." And he did it. And then I hired some stenographers and so on, and put posters everywhere in the town, and started this innovative coaching institute. And very soon students came pouring in. So there were so many in numbers that I couldn't manage. So I had to devise very innovative ways of the brighter ones teaching the weaker ones, and the weaker ones becoming bright, but the brighter ones were the ones who really benefited. They became masters. Yeah? After each of my lessons, that would happen. Anyway, I don't have time to go into those details, but in 2 months or so, many students started succeeding, and I was very, very well off. By today's standards, in less than 2 months, I had earned 17 lakh or something, yeah, at 19. So that's why I always say, by today's standards, by today's lingo, I say I was demonetized completely, because I lost interest in money. I saw money can come so fast, so easily in just 2 months for rest of the 3 years of my needs, that again, that empathy part made me feel that there should be something I should be doing for those who need me. This is about what I need, but life is about what needs me more than just what I need. So that year I earned enough for all the 3 years. From next year I started doing it pro bono. But then I also saw that when I started doing pro bono, fewer and fewer students started coming to my lessons. People value money, it seems. Anyway, so with that learning, it changed my life. One, that I completely got over with the craze for money and all that. Secondly, I came face to face with what happens in schools. These children were so bright, and yet they were failing. So I could see that there was nothing wrong with them. It was the system that was failing them. And therefore, the system needed to be changed. And that's what you saw in the video, that we started changing the system, and that too in the government, because that's where the children of Ladakh were, children of India are in the government schools. And very soon, together with the government, we started working. But before that, people would laugh. It was not as easy. They said, what? You want to change the education system? What is your qualification? And I would say, I'm no B.Ed, no M.Ed, no PhD, but I am a victim of the education system, and victims pretty much should be able to change the system, yeah? So we started working with the victims. Actually, we had no money for scholars, we had no money for consultants and PhDs, but what we did have was hundreds of failures in every home. You remember, 95%? So we said, why don't we make an ants army out of these failures who are down and depressed in their homes? Called everyone in very interesting ways. We called them around, dancing, learning and learning acting and so on. And then we prepared a brigade of them armed with street plays about why the education system is failing. Songs about how the youth should come out and change the system. And these young people could do what no scholars, no consultants could do. They could dance, they could sing, they could play, and they could walk for weeks into the mountains. And very soon they had changed the priorities of the people all around Ladakh. Why the school system was failing? There were many reasons, but one of the reasons was that people didn't care. Every time there were politicians, they would ask for kerosene, they would ask for rice, they would ask for subsidies, and the politicians got busy doing that. But now, with these ants army penetrating into every corner of Ladakh, their message was that if you really want change, postpone kerosene, postpone rice, ask for quality education. And it actually happened. Everywhere people started asking for quality education. Leaders would go to villages, come back saying, what about education? Power secretary, don't come inside. Ration secretary, don't come inside. But education, bring them in. And that's how then the results started changing from 5% to 36 to 55 to 75. So this was part of the journey of how things started changing. When you start taking action, things do start change. And well, my philosophy was that if there are challenges, then you go full steam, head on, and tackle them. Yeah, like they say in this Urdu sher that I really like. And it's about Ladakh also. You saw what Ladakh is, and you saw within Ladakh what the education system was. And what inspires me and describes Ladakh as falak ko zid hai jahan bijliyan girane ki, falak is asman. फलक को जिद है जहां बिजलियां गिराने की, हमें भी जिद है वहीं आशियां बनाने की. शुक्रिया. Thank you very much. I'll stop here now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. This was not a mere address, But honestly, I think I can speak for everyone when I say that this was a life lesson. You've been such an inspiration to all of us. We'd like you to come back to the center stage. May I request Vineet to please join us and present a memento to him. What a wonderful, inspiring human being, ladies and gentlemen. Please put your hands together once again for the one and only Mr. Sonam Wangchuk. Thank you, sir. Continue to do the great work that you do. And that brilliant mind will certainly have all of us inspired for years and years to come. I know we're running a little behind time, so I'll make this very quick. I'd like to invite on stage Ms. Anita Belani, the Independent Director of Vivriti Capital, to please come up and address the gathering. Also introduce our keynote speaker for this evening. She has served as the Managing Director and India Head for Russell and Reynolds, and operating partner at many, many firms. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you very much. A warm round of applause for her.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I guess it's been so inspirational that it's hard to leave the gathering because, we've had some amazing sessions, and I want to keep it very brief because I know everybody's waiting for our keynote speaker. But one of the things that, I've been trying to see through the evening is a, common thread that is there in pretty much all the sessions we've experienced. When you think about it, everybody, all our speakers talked about opportunity in adversity, taking the challenges and making them into opportunities. So I, just heard Mr. Wangchuk also end on that note. And we heard Mithali say that, our, panel talked about it. The other thing that came very strongly for me was the humility. Everybody talked about the humility that they had to, sort of imbibe. Mithali also talked about how she was, looking at power first and then understood that it was all about, leading was about empathy and humility, and that came out in our panel session also. And then one of the other things is about innovation. So everybody talked about looking at innovation from a very different perspective because, when you think about it, innovation is there, but we don't see it. And, the new ideas that come to us come from very different angles. And the Ladakh story is such an inspiring story from that perspective. And also the, relentless pursuit of execution. Because if you don't focus on making things strong at the base and, keeping your processes very strong, nothing will really work. But at the same time, you cannot lose strategic focus. So while you are executing, it's about, somebody said zooming in and zooming out, right? I mean, you have to do that. So when I was looking at the values of Vivriti Capital, and, just thinking back to that and what is our culture, because it's all about stickiness. When we talk about people working with us, they work with us because of some very important tenets in our culture. And I was able to draw a parallel to all these things with Vivriti because, humility is there as one of the values, innovation, opportunities in adversity, relentless pursuit of, of execution, also being, looking at the opportunity that is there strategically. So it is very interesting how all aspects of life, from sport to, to a story in Ladakh, to all our businesses, how we all come together, and at the base of it is the same thing. And that brings me to our keynote speaker, Mr. K.V. Kamath. I'm sure we are all waiting for, to hear him out. If I were to think about his story, this is the biggest game changer in the financial services industry. Taking a developmental financial institution and creating one of the biggest retail banks in the country, which is ICICI Bank, but not really stopping there. Also creating very large institutions in asset management and insurance. So it's, somebody who's always looking for this opportunity. And a stalwart like this is, so inspirational. And I think, there's no stopping somebody like Mr. Kamath because he's still at it and he's still part of NAPFID. And I'm sure there are many more journeys and opportunities for him to conquer and inspire us. So, Mr. Kamath, please do come on stage and we'd love to hear from you.
Good evening. Thank you, Spelani, for those warm, welcoming remarks. I must say that I was fascinated to hear Mr. Wangchuk speak, and several things that he said are so true, and those are probably the very same things that in my own journey come to mind in my own journey, and the key in that is curiosity, because curiosity is probably what has taken everything that we have done in the bank, starting from the development bank to where we are today, to where we are actually, as it were. It's a story of technology, technology opportunity, and then growing on that opportunity, looking at what next, and always trying to be curious of what could happen, trying to look at the big picture, connecting the dots and taking them onwards. So I'm not going to tell you the ICICI story. Somebody told me that there are 20 people who are heading various companies who are ex-ICICI staff who are here today. So I don't want to at least bore them with the story, but I just want to maybe weave what is happening in terms of technology evolution, all in 2 or 3 minutes from 1996, which is where I think the real technology impact was, in a way, was seen in India. Go on to the events of the last couple of years, a couple of months, sorry, couple of years, 2021, 22, it's COVID, the current geopolitical situation, again, everything in 1 or 2 minutes, and then come down to what I would think is what is the crux of what is happening today, all of you as game changers, because I think that's, to me, a more interesting story than what I could recount, because my story is just a story, but what you are going to do is paint the future. So I think that, to me, is critical. But going back to technology, I think the whole change probably started in 1995, because till then, technology was inaccessible. In a bank, you had a mainframe. And when I became CEO of ICICI, the parent of the bank, I said, if we have to grow and we have to put a mainframe in the bank, we can't afford it. So my IT people said, well, then you basically can't run technology. I said, no, there are newer things happening, and let's take a bet on those. And these were the distributed processing. It just started with the what you can say is the Sun box, what Sun Microsystems was putting out. And I said, let's take a bet on it. Why? Because I'm curious, and I find that there's something called Moore's law. Basically, technology is growing at probably a pace which I will never grow at. Those days say that Moore's law tells you that technology is growing at a square every 2 years, and the costs are also dropping. I said, I'm not going to grow at a square in 2 years at all. So I will be under the technology growth curve. So we took the bet, long story short. Basically, consistently since then, I think ICICI and most Indian banks, well, all Indian banks, so most Indian banks, run technology at probably 1/20th, 1/30th of the cost of what global majors are doing. And that is the thread that I think plays out even to what you are doing today. So we became adept at using technology because we had no choice. And we used newer technology, took a bet on it and scored. Similarly, in context of trying to do something different because you have no options. So I'm a great believer in a theory of constraints, that you throw a constraint and you have to jump higher, you have no option. So we had a constraint. In the bank of 1999-2000, ICICI Bank, and maybe 250 or 300 branches. I said, can we acquire? So there were a few acquisition targets, but they would give me another 250 branches, nothing more. So how do you grow technology? So what do? You put in ATMs, and everybody laughed at us, because we were getting licenses for only 50 new branches in a year. And the largest bank out there had 10,000 branches. I said, I don't have 200 years to live to become somewhere there with 10,000 branches. So you had to put out ATMs. And at a point in time when there were 50 ATMs, you said, we will put 1,000 ATMs. Well, I won't go into the challenges there. But that was rolled out. In the next 8 months, we rolled them out. And then, of course, we kept growing it. What I'm saying is the ability to take calculated risks on technology was there even then. People took it in a measured way. I think it is today available in much larger footprints, as it were, and you could do it at a much faster pace. and probably at a cost cheaper than what it was then, because all costs have disrupted, and we'll come to that in a moment. So in a way, technology, the evolution is now upwards of 25 years old, and it is now gathering full momentum. But then, even as technology evolved, if you look at technology that was deployed by financial sector players, and I know that a lot of you are in the tech space, the fintech space and so on. If you look at evolution that has taken place up to the day COVID hit us, let's say the year 2019, and then look at what has happened since 2020, and then try to measure the evolution in those 3 years, you will understand what we are capable of. Not necessarily when I say we, certainly we as a nation, but you as businesses. In 3 years, where has your journey taken you, and what is the rapid change that has happened? Now, before we look at the opportunity that is there for the game changers, what I want to put in context is, in the 2-year period itself, a whole lot of mindsets got reset. A complete reset of the mind in a very short period of time, as it were. I call it in the blink of an eye. You look at, when in March there was a lockdown, what did people do? I think that's where the first time you could see massive development in apps by stores, by businesses, by farms in the village, so that a supply chain could be established. And within the next 15 days or 1 month, platforms to pay for these things. It started evolution, and that's where you see the surge in payments, in the whole payment space, as it were. This is one end. Then you see corporate India. This is again a fascinating thing that happened. Initially, everybody was in despair. Since first 1 quarter, nobody could get to work. So what do? But by the second quarter, disruption had started, and disruption of the mind or reset of the mind had started. And I found companies telling me when I talked to them, "Oh, we are now back to around 90%, 95% capacity utilization." Second quarter. This is the July, October, September quarter. And I asked, out of curiosity, I asked one of these companies, "But where are your employees? What percentage of your employees have come back?" 75%. 75%. And you're producing 95? Yeah, 95%. So how? So he says, we have reimagined processes, we have put in some technology, and this is what has happened. So I said, are the 25% required? Only if we expand. So what does this mean in simple common man's terms, basically, or economics terms? In economics terms, this is productivity gain. So you had a huge jump in productivity, and you can see that in the quarterly results that have happened consistently since, I would say, the second quarter of the year 2021. You see that in corporate profitabilities. So corporates started getting healthy during that period when everybody expected them to be under pain. Of course, the individual mind had been reset. The individual mind had been reset at all levels. I always take the example of the apartment complex I live in, 60 families, all older people there, all older family heads there, women, who had probably were using a phone, maybe do a little bit of WhatsApp, see YouTube, now getting into and starting to understand and manipulate a Google Sheet, an Excel sheet. This is before the app came. And of course, when the app came, they became good at apps, then use Google Pay or whatever payment platform you want. And all these people who otherwise would have thought will never get to use technology. So they had done it. Corporate India had done it. And you then found something even more remarkable. In June of that year, or July of 2020, the Reserve Bank set up this expert panel to look at restructuring, because they anticipated that massive restructuring will happen. I was asked to work on that panel. So our initial estimate, Reserve Bank's estimates from rating agencies and industry focus groups, talking to industry, it was 7.5 lakh crores will need to be restructured. 7.5 lakh crores. 1 year later, the panel, the term of the panel came to an end, and the number that was done was only 46,000 crores. And at the exit time, by 21 middle, you started seeing that all Indian companies are doing well, they're deleveraged and so on. It's not that people could not come to the panel. People who thought that they needed, I think, reinvented themselves. So much so that in 1 year, they did not need a helping hand in that period. And yes, the government and the Reserve Bank gave a helping hand to MSMEs, and through guarantee schemes and so on. So indeed, that helped. And several actions taken by the government in socio-economic context, the free food that was given, in the corporate context, low interest rates that were allowed to the system, I think did a whole lot of good. But that completes my one part of that the technology journey happened, and then corporate India, which wasn't really competitive, suddenly started getting competitive during the COVID period. And by the time we said that we were fairly well on top of COVID, I think corporate India had a clean balance sheet, hardly any debt on the books. The banks also said, because the corporates are doing well, our balance sheets are clear. So you are now a situation, circa early 20 or late 21, early 22, where you're saying that corporate India is clean, banks are clean, and of course the retail borrower is also now well behaved. So the retail borrower is paying back his obligations. So you have this. So I would think that that gives us a clear path in the next 25 years, because we hear the government talk of India at 100, India at 75, and India at 100. And I want to paint in a little bit of India at 100, because that is going to be, I'm sure, a big part of what the game changers want to do. What happens at 100, or journey to 100 from where we are, age 75 to 100. But as I'll talk about that in the last 1 minute of my, I still have 2-3 minutes to go. I know that I'm standing between you and dinner, but let me take you through what I think is the next step. The next step is where all of you, starting with Vivriti, are directly, I think, in the midst of it, as it were. That is, the disruptions led by technology. We talked about 25 years back, technology making its, I would say, inroads, but now technology is disrupting. Now, technology is disrupting for various reasons. One, I think it has become affordable. It has become ubiquitous. I use the phrase, I think sometimes I use 3 or 4 Ds to describe technology today. I think technology is democratic today, and technology is demographic today. Technology, of course, is disruptive, it is digital, and I think it is dematerialized. Now, digital and disruptive, you all understand, so I don't need to talk about it. But when I say democratic, I don't mean politics. It is democratic in the sense it treats everybody equally. And everybody today, given our data costs, has access to technology. So the handheld device that you have in your pocket today, a few years back, that was your privilege. Today it is no longer so. Everybody around you can afford to have one and can afford to use it, because data costs have dropped to that extent. So that to me becomes a huge democratization of the technology process. Demographic, I gave the example. If the older people in my apartment complex, everybody could use technology. Demographic advantage, or the demographic advantage that was talked about, the dividend that was talked about, I believe has been turned around on its head today. Because those people we thought that could never contribute can now contribute, can become productive in a way we never imagined earlier, and through the technology process. Dematerialized, what you have in your hand, it does multiple things today. With just a few years back, you probably needed 10 gadgets to do it. Today, it does it for you. And assetless businesses that are run, in a way, is also dematerialization. All these things put together are providing a new disruptive force. And all this in a situation where costs are dropping dramatically. So I always, when I was asked to set up a BRICS bank in Shanghai, I first said to my team, in terms of technology, what we will do is, free mein kya milta hai? This is a basic premise we will run. So our cost will be nowhere near what any bank runs, and not, of course, what any development bank runs. And so where do we learn? So something like what Mr. Wang said, be curious. I said, let us learn from Google. So do a simple Google search. I did it myself. Top 10 or top 5 or 10 HR platforms, cloud-based. Now, ma'am will probably appreciate it. So first one that came across was something called Bamboo HR. And there were 4 or 5. The Bamboo HR we evaluated. A quick evaluation, 3-4 days. We found enough references, enough ease of operation. And it cost me $8,000. $8,000 for a platform, and I pay an annual fee of $10 per employee. And I don't think we would have had more than 250 employees at the BRICS Bank. So they're paying $2,500. We did the same thing for the ERP platform also, NetSuite. Not 10,000, maybe one more zero you add to that. And that's what we paid, not what we would have paid other mainframe-based historical systems that are there. I won't take you through all sum total. I think our technology platform costs us less than $500,000, where we're looking at multiples, 10x, 20x of that generally that is used in. I'm not trying to say what was different in BRICS. That's not the intention at all. I think that is available to us in spades in India. We could do business, each one of you is a game changer, a disruptor, using technologies that are available today, and technologies which virtually you can ask a question, free mein kya milta hai, and put it in and make it, put it to use for yourself. So that becomes a big, I would say, opportunity in the whole game-changing path that we have in the next, I talked about 25 years, immediately in the next, say 2 to 5 years, and then as you go along. So I would think disruptions are going to be here to stay. So who will be disrupted? And I'm sure those of you in the fintech business, I don't want to talk about other businesses, but basically I would put it this way. Every incumbent is up for disruption. Every incumbent is up for disruption for a very simple reason. Because the ability to understand what is happening, ability to be curious, and in a way align in the interest of your organization to take that path of being curious and implement things which are different from what you are doing is yet to be seen. If you open a bank app, how many of them actually look like a website masquerading as an app? I would actually ask you, name me one bank app, whichever you are using, which is actually an app. You name me one incumbent stockbroking app, which is really an app. It's a website designed 20 years back, still masquerading as an app. How long does it take to disrupt these people? And that is where the opportunity is. Yes, disruption won't happen at that pace because you've got regulators to, in the picture, they are going to, in a way guide it, because we don't want disruption which is then uncontrollable and has consequences which are not desirable, particularly when these players are dealing with public money. So you will not want a disruption at a level that could be harmful to public interest or the economy. But at the margin, everything else is going to be disrupted. So you will need to map what is the space you will want to watch and then go on. I think I saw Vinit put up the numbers about the mutual funds and how soon index funds established. That's a given. What will then happen to that business, and what metamorphosis will that business go through? So I talked about broking. The next in line, I think, is the whole asset management space. Through a variety of ways, technology is making it possible today. Now, 2 years back, how many index funds were there in India? And today, look at it, every single thing is either there's an index fund or an ETF out there. So this itself will drive change, and the technological advances will drive this even further. Now, you can go on and on. Ultimately, I think discipline will be brought in to some extent where the regulator doesn't want disruption of an order which they are uncomfortable with. I think is very valuable. This was in the space that you are operating in, fintechs and other law. Same will be true of other spaces also, because why will it be different? The innovator, the person who has the ability to take a calculated risk will. Other lesson that in all these things is going to be two last lessons before I go on. One is there will be constraints, and I think we always believed that in a theory, what I call the theory of constraints, is that throw a constraint, jump higher. There is no alternative. Throw a constraint again, jump even higher. All of you will learn to do that as you go along, because that's where this is heading, the whole business. Because opportunity is so large that you will need to overcome challenges and grow. Let me then put this in context. Where do we go? I said 100. Where do we go at 100? My view of India is very simple. I think 8% growth is given that corporate India is in good shape, the rest of India is doing well. This is without talking of you guys, the new disruptors. I'm not talking of them as yet. And this is what conventionally we are talking of as 8% growth, 7 to 8% growth. I don't think any economist has really factored in what I would call the opportunity that you guys bring in. I would think easily the opportunity that you guys bring in is the icing on this 8%. Now, you guys determine what that is. It is in your hands, and you can drive that future as to what that is going to be. But I don't, thank you, ma'am. I certainly don't think that is in the 8% that I am looking at. Thank you. The 8% I am looking at is conventional growth. What you're going to provide is outstanding growth on top of that. What could that number be? If I look at China, in the last 5-7 years, this pie, which pie we are talking of, the technology explosion that is happening, that pie is accounting for between 30 to 35% of the overall GDP. So when I say India 8% growth is without that pie, you put on a number, whatever you are comfortable with. You want to put 30%, do it. If you want to put 20%, still add that number. But I don't think it's going to be less than 20%. So if it's 8% plus 20%, you are nearing 10% growth in any case, with all the contribution that you will bring in. And this business, the disruptors will be the largest employers in this country, in the organized sector as I see it. They will provide the largest link to jobs in this country, and will also create the largest number of new enterprises in this country. Again, I have not seen any economists sit down and do this analysis, but take it. That's what I have seen. If in the last 2-3 years, there are 65,000 or so new enterprises that have been set up. This is what my friend Mohandas Bhai tells me. Each employing maybe between 10 and 20 people. So it's say 1 million people employed there directly. You can compute what the indirect employment is. We're talking of at least 5 to 7. So you're talking of 7 million jobs. So how many more will happen annually as we go along? And we may not know at that point of time talking of a 3 trillion economy. We're talking of a 3 trillion economy which is basically growing at 8 to 10%. And then if you look at this 3 trillion economy today, which is at India at 75, and extrapolate it to what it will be, India at 100. As I see it, take 8 to 10% compounding growth, you will come to 25 trillion in the next 25 years. 25 trillion takes you squarely into the big league. And you are then something to be, everybody will be interested in. Now, I won't stop at that number. That number is interesting. And what it will do to uplift poverty and take this country forward. What I'm looking at is what it will do to enterprise. Because the enterprise that we are looking at for a 3 trillion economy is not what we are looking at 6 trillion economy. And it's not double. When you're going to 6 trillion, that enterprise is going to be maybe 3x. And at every turn of that number, 6 to 12, it's again not going to be double, it's going to be 3x or 4x. So the ability of this growth to propel India along is, I would say, unimagined. So in a way, I want you guys to imagine that future. That future not of a number of 25 trillion at India at 100, but of what that does to you, your businesses, people around you, to the economy around you, to the people who have not yet participated in this growth and be contributors to this. So as I think, challenges that you will see will fall by the wayside. I will end by, maybe a slight note of caution on one subject. It is, and I leave this as a thought in your mind, I think there is always going to be a challenge between value creation and valuation. Almost every platform that I have seen, and young people come to me, discuss, I have been impressed, enormously impressed. Platforms that I use, which all of you use probably in daily, I'm enormously impressed. These are really innovators. These guys are disruptors, and they will mean a lot to India as we go along. What could disrupt this individual place, not collectively, is a dysfunctional, I think, between the value proposition in their business and the valuation expectations that somebody's setting in their mind. Get this thing, to equilibrium, and there is no stopping you. If you keep this in disequilibrium, that is, you have value in the platform, but your valuation is up in the air, I think you will find challenges as you go along. So I believe that people will find equilibrium. There are already a few examples out there. The market is a big teacher. And I'm sure everybody has noticed what is happening. We'll take it for granted. Aspire for that 25 trillion economy and where you are in that economy. Align your value and valuations, and I'm sure you will be unstoppable. Thank you, Vinit. Thank you, the Vivriti team. Thank all of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very, very much. We'd like you to just stay back on stage, and we'd like to present Memento to you. And a quick photo opportunity. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time here with us, sir. We truly appreciate it. And thank you for those wonderful insights as well. It's been a pleasure having you with us. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this almost brings us to the end of the summit, and it has been a wonderful evening, hasn't it? I'd now like to invite on stage Ms. Namrata Kaul, the independent chairperson of Vivriti Capital, to please come up on stage and give us the closing remarks. Ms. Namrata Kaul brings on board over 30 years of global banking experience. She served as the Managing Director, Corporate and Investment Banking at Deutsche Bank, and prior to that, she was Head of Asia Business for Deutsche Bank based out of London. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. We've now come to the conclusion of this Game Changers 2022 summit. The event today, and thank you for being such a patient and engaged audience. The event was all about you. It was all about the entrepreneurs and the game changers who are sitting in this room. It has been Vivriti's pride and privilege to be part of your journey so far, and we look forward to continuing our engagement even more intensely going forward. We thank you for taking out the time today and joining us in this session today. The last 3 hours have been phenomenal. They've been intense. Our minds have been assailed with a torrent of ideas, visions, thoughts, comments, challenges. We've heard from people who have been true path breakers, and they've created long-lasting impact and change in their respective fields. It will probably take us some time to reflect on all that we have heard today, to process this information and probably form our own personal perspectives of what we have heard today. But suffice to say that whatever we have heard today has been inspiring. And to that extent, I think the summit has been successful in achieving what it set out to do. That is to constantly challenge ourselves and to aim for more. And that is exactly what we continue to do at Vivriti today. While we are celebrating today a significant milestone, the journey ahead is long, perhaps another decade or two. It's a journey that has commenced. Much has been achieved, but there is much, much more to do. We continue to be focused on the path ahead. We are making the right investments in technology and product development. We're making the right investments in technology and product development. We are working on our global outreach, and we are gearing up the team for an exciting future. It is our belief that the market needs not one Vivriti, but many such Vivritis, and it's for all of us to pave the path to reach that goal. On that positive note, I would like to conclude by thanking everyone who's been here, the audience, the stakeholders, the entire Vivriti team that has been working behind the scenes to make this event a great success. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you again on many such sessions, and thank you for your business, for your engagement, and for your partnership with us.
Thank you, Ms. Kaul. Thank you very, very much. That brings us to the end of this evening's proceedings, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all once again very much for being a part of the first ever edition of the Game Changers Summit 2022. This is a community that is certainly going to increase the GDP of the country and going to foster one another. If you haven't done so already, please do join us for dinner, and we hope to see you for many more sessions, and of course the second edition as well. Once again, a big thank you to our media partner, CNBC TV 18. Thank you for the support as always, and wonderful once again to have you here with us. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.